Shaggy sighed as he walked. Again, he was out in the scorching sun in the early morning. Walking. His van had been requisitioned by his friends. Apparently, they were going to get it ready for tonight. Which was more important than ferrying him to what was possibly an ambush. He scratched the back of his head as he came to a stop on the sidewalk and moved to a nearby stone wall. Leaning against the condemned store's brickwork, he thought about his decision again. He and the others had spent much of their evening discussing the benefits and drawbacks. Working with the Austin Police Department was probably a horrible idea. But the benefits could be great. Vlad had been vehemently opposed to it. Not because he didn't trust the APD, but because he didn't want to stray too far from being an in-game villain. Which Shaggy understood. But, at the same time, they were a villainous organization already. They had goons and lackeys all in Undertown. Vlad's argument had been about what would happen when they moved topside. But the others had agreed that moving topside was probably a ways off, so helping some cops bust a couple of junkies and dealers for an easier time topside was a good deal. They had compromised. Shaggy would head to the station alone to hear the deal in full. If anything went sideways, he would deal with the consequences. Because, as Vlad said, it was his dumbass nose that got them into this mess. Shaggy had agreed, but as he got closer to the station, Zelthub had mentioned, his nerves were getting the better of him. Not to mention, the increase in drone activity made him nervous. He peeled himself off the wall as he steeled himself again. And in with the police topside was worth it, and if they could skim a few credits from a few junkies, who would complain? A drone buzzed overhead and Shaggy dipped his head downward, hoping to avoid a facial recognition. The damn metal thing zoomed by, leaving him alone, and he blew out a breath as he continued on. Several people on the sidewalk gave him odd looks, but Shaggy ignored them and scanned the street signs. According to their van's GPS mapping system, the closest police station was a block away. That is, if he remembered the directions right. Shaggy grunted as he hopped off the curb and ran over to the next block. Horns honked and angry drivers cursed him, but Shaggy rushed forward. He both wanted this over with and wanted it to never start. Shaggy did not know how he was going to escape a freaking police station if shit went tits up. He was probably walking toward a respawn, which wasn't entirely too bad. But, according to the forums, dying by the police meant your character was sent to prison. So he would respawn in the nearest prison and he would have to break out again. Which was a major pain in the ass. Shaggy stopped again as the thought of having his in-game character in prison struck him. It meant he couldn't help with the job tonight. It also meant he would have to wait to meet his wife. She would give him no small amount of shit for it, too. Not because he couldn't make it, but because he had been too much of a noob to get out of his predicament. Thoughts of his wife made him bring up the in-game clock. She should have been in the game somewhere by now. Shaggy had told her about Undertown, and that is where they were planning to meet. Shaggy just hoped he and the guys got through their plans before he had to go down and meet her. He was excited. Playing games with his better half was always a fun time. Although she could be a little competitive. He smiled wanly think of her. Hey buddy, you can't just stop in the middle of the sidewalk. Shaggy turned and glared up at a tall, bright white alien. They were bald and androgynous enough that Shaggy couldn't guess at a gender. He gave the alien a once-over and just growled under his breath. The alien's stoic face remained placid-looking, but they took a half-step back. Shaggy snorted and continued walking. He was close to the station now. Soon, the large black metal building came into view and Shaggy sucked in a breath. The building's dark walls and large gated parking lot made it incongruous with the surrounding buildings. It was a 3-story metal building fenced in by metal walls. Meanwhile, the surrounding buildings were all brick. Black unmarked hovercars flew from the roof of the station and traveled the skylanes as drones dashed around the place. But what froze Shaggy in his tracks were the 2 sentry towers at the east and west end of the station's fence. They were 20 feet high and large-bore laser cannons rested at their tops. Hey! Asshole! What did I? The voice started again, from behind him. Shaggy spun and summoned the claws of one hand. He thrust them under the alien's slim chin and growled again. The alien froze and tried to process what was going on as Shaggy stopped growling and glared. He forced his claws upward slightly, making sure the alien understood him, before he shifted his hand back and spun on his heel. He marched toward the station as something occurred to him. Something he hadn't noticed in the fight with the federal agent, Albert. His normally long black claws were now tinged slightly red. He mulled that over when a loud whirring sound echoed in his ears. Expecting another drone, Shaggy ducked his head and continued forward. It wasn't until a loud klaxon sounded that Shaggy realized that the whirring probably wasn't a drone. Glancing up, he saw one of the sentry cannons had both of its barrels aimed right at him. He had barely made it into the station compound, just past the front gate. A gate that was rapidly closing as drones and cops spilled out of the station. Shaggy put his hands up inside as he spotted a large triceratops rushing toward him, shoulder down. The triceracop was followed closely by several of their compatriots, and soon Shaggy was squashed under a mountain of bodies as people shouted, alarm bells rang. He felt his arms and legs being shackled by thick metal bands. He felt exhausted as the cuffs seemed to drain him of energy, and the cops hoisted him to his feet. What followed was a surprisingly quick and efficient in-processing procedure, where Shaggy was scanned and photographed several times. When he was finally asked if he had anything to declare, Shaggy grinned and said, "Officer Zelthub." That sparked another round of questioning that Shaggy ignored. Several cops looked like they wanted to get rough with him, but Shaggy just snorted and kept his mouth shut. Internally, he hoped he wouldn't have to make a break for it. He was placed into an empty holding cell and left alone. A large camera and some kind of alien scanner monitored his cage, so Shaggy sighed and sat back to wait. As he contemplated perusing the forums, he realized he hadn't checked his point totals in a while. That was probably a better use of his time, all things considered. So he dove into his character screen. Lycanthrope mutation tree. Attack LVL 15. Canines LVL 1. Claws LVL 15. Demon claws LVL 15. Sharpness LVL 5. Serrated edge. Convex edge LVL 1 asterisk. Bone claws. Defense LVL 10. Tough bones LVL 3. Utility LVL 15. Partial transformation LVL 5. Limb transformation LVL 4. Regeneration LVL 26 asterisk. Limb regen LVL 2. Pain suppression LVL 3. Points 50. General tree. Toughness LVL 25 asterisk. Thick skin LVL 15. Skin resistances LVL 5. Skin durability LVL 1. Dermal armor LVL 1 asterisk. Reflexes LVL 23 asterisk. Quick hands LVL 10. Manual dexterity LVL 2. Mind LVL 21 asterisk. Enhanced focus LVL 3. Points 80. Shaggy huffed. Not a lot of points, but then again, he hadn't done a lot of fighting other than hunting Quinnica with his pack. Which probably accounted for much of the points. That and the fight with Albert and Ziva. Although the fact that his claws were now labeled as demon claws made him raise an eyebrow. That was probably a change the blood god had been talking about. Would it get stronger if he absorbed more demon blood? Or did he have to put points into it like everything else? Gritting his teeth, he added a couple of points to demon claws. Demon claws LVL 15. Points 45. Shaggy grimaced. Somehow, he just knew that the demon claws were going to be a point vacuum. He waffled a bit before he set the claws aside and looked over the rest of the lycanthropy tree. His defense was covered with his general tree. But if he wanted to double down, he could probably throw a few points into that. But his regeneration had pulled him out of just as many scrapes. Deciding to stick with his all-rounder approach, he focused on defense and decided to at least get it to its next evolution. Defense LVL 15. Tough Bones LVL3. Enhanced Evasion LVL1. Points, 25. Shaggy stared at his newest evolution and sighed. He had mostly been tanking hits thanks to his regeneration. But he supposed not being hit was another way to stay in a fight. He didn't think he would spend any points on it. But for now, he'd see how he did with it. The rest of the points he dumped into partial transformation. He had been using it a lot, and it helped when he couldn't go full wolf. Partial transformation LVL8. Points, 0. Not a lot there, but Shaggy just moved on to the general tree and gave it a look over. The reflexes cell was close to another evolution, and that would probably help with his enhanced evasion. Afterward he could try to get mine to 25 as well. He stopped as he heard footsteps in the hall outside his cell, but soon they faded and he started spending points. Reflexes LVL 25 *. Quick hands LVL 10. Manual dexterity LVL 2. Quick feet LVL 1. Points, 55. Shaggy just nodded and moved on. That made sense. Fast hands and fast feet. Although he wondered how fast he was going to be now. He was tempted to stand up and test it, but his leg and hand manacles would probably get in the way. Moving on to mind, he hit the mental button and watched his points drain away. Mind LVL 25 *. Enhanced focus LVL 3. Mental defense LVL 1. Points, 15. Shaggy had barely finished reading before he dumped the last of his points into mental defense. His memories of Ziva's psychic attack were still fresh in his mind. Mental defense LVL 2. Points, 0. Shaggy looked over his sheet again and grinned. He was probably spreading himself around too much. But at least all his other stats were almost to par with regeneration now. He had never been one to min-max, anyway. He brought up his skills to see if there were any changes there, and he sputtered at what he saw. Skills. Werewolf. Werewolf senses beginner, level 3. Werewolf form beginner, level 3 *. Demon wolf, beginner level 1 *. Werewolf speed beginner level 1. Werewolf durability beginner level 3. Normal. Claw fighting beginner level 4 *. Leaping beginner level 3. Enhanced senses beginner level maxed *. Endurance beginner level 4 *. Fight like an animal beginner level 3 *. Pack hunting beginner level 1 *. What the hell was a demon wolf? That had to be the blood god's gift. Apparently, his werewolf transformation was now completely changed. Shaggy had to fight the urge to shift in his cell. Thankfully, the draining power of the police's handcuffs made it difficult for him to do anything, or he might have tried. Losing 2 levels in the skill was probably a pain, but for something called a demon wolf, it was probably worth it. Unfortunately, the rest of his werewolf skills hadn't grown at all from lack of use. But his normal ones were moving up pretty well. His senses were maxed and 4 out of 5 of his old skills had all seen growth. He even had a new one, pack hunting. He brought up the information on the skill as footsteps resounded in the hall again. Pack hunting. You are just learning the ropes of fighting with your follow pack members. Each of them is like a new appendage, ready to claw and bite your enemies. As your pack grows, so too will your ability to take down larger prey. Receive a bonus to sensing and fighting skills when with your pack. Bonus is calculated based on the size of your pack you are currently fighting with. Shaggy let out a low whistle as he read through the skill. It was impressive, and if it went up with his pack numbers, it would probably get pretty beefy. Odd that it didn't have a number attached to it, though. He briefly wondered if he had shut off that function along with some of his other notifications, but he let it go. It was a useful skill, but one he would have to keep an eye on when he was back with his pack. He tried to feel them through the pack link he had. But the distance or the suppressing cuffs dulled the feeling. He found he was actually missing his group of rowdy NPCs. Shaggy figured he would take them out hunting when he got back. He was tempted to check his pack tab on the menus, but the sound of clanging made him close everything out. A uniformed cop was standing outside his cell, glaring at him. Shaggy smiled and gave a little wave. The human cop snorted and barked orders. To the gate, scumbag. We're going for a walk. Shaggy snorted and moved over to the bars, right in front of the cell's gate. He couldn't resist quipping. Oh, I love walks. Are we going to the park? Shaggy flashed his pointed teeth, but the cop ignored him and opened the cell door. The cop's baton sparked with an ethereal blue glow, and Shaggy was sure it was electric or magically charged somehow. His new friend gripped the cuffs around Shaggy's hands and tried to lead him down the hall. They stalled a little as Shaggy's dense bones made the aggressive move a little tricky. The officer pulled twice before Shaggy gave the guy a break and pretended to be dragged. They walked down the linoleum hallways for a few brief minutes until they came to another door. 2 officers were stationed outside. A tall, slim green alien and another mauve-looking alien. Both in some kind of riot armor. The green alien moved to open the door as Shaggy and his guard approached. Inside was a small metal room with a plastic table and 2 chairs. Shaggy had to stifle a chuckle at the obvious interrogation room. It even had an old fluorescent light bulb hanging from the ceiling on a wire. Shaggy was led to the table and his cuffs were somehow connected to the table and his leg manacles were strapped to the chair. He didn't see any connecting points on his handcuffs, so he figured it was magic. Once his job was done, the human officer left and Shaggy was left alone in the metal room on the uncomfortable plastic chair. He sighed as he looked around at the blue-black metal walls and the gray-white tiled floor. The room was completely empty except for the chairs and table. There were no mics or cameras either. He didn't even see an observation window he had seen on some of the old cop show vids. He flexed his wrists a little, testing the bonds of the cuffs. But whatever magic was on them made him feel lethargic the more he tried to push against them. He relaxed and tried his legs, but the same thing happened. Shaggy shook his head as the sleepy feeling filled his head. They were an interesting way to keep enhanced individuals subdued. But he wondered what would happen if he did a partial shift. He gave the room another once-over before he tried. Still nothing. His arms bulged, and a wave in exhaustion hit him just as the sound of metal breaking filled his ears. There was a loud clang and Shaggy felt the drowsiness quickly leave his body just as a loud alarm went off. Scrambling at the door made him shift his arms back to normal just as the door flung open and 3 cops came rushing in. Shaggy smiled at them as he gave a little wave at a familiar face. Officer Zelthub. So good to see you. Zelthub grimaced as he looked between the broken cuffs on the table and Shaggy. The other 2 officers were the green and mauve door guards. They each had their baton out and looked like they were trying to decide what to do. Zelthub put an arm up and waved them toward the door. It's all right, Hicks. You and Muldoon can go back to watching the door. I've got this. The green alien gave Shaggy a dirty look. You sure, Zell? Zelthub nodded, and the 2 cops marched out of the room. Each glaring angrily at Shaggy. Shaggy waved goodbye and tried to exude an air of confidence. Breaking the cuffs hadn't been that hard, but he wasn't too sure about fighting his way out of the entire police department. Zelthub muttered some words into his shoulder and the alarm stopped. The large red demon sighed at the same time as Shaggy. The alarm was both piercing and annoying. Shaggy would have guessed that it had some underlying magic to it as well. But maybe his new mental defense had blunted some of it. The other plastic chair in the room creaked loudly as Zelthub sat down across from Shaggy. Shaggy shuffled his own chair closer to the table. Legs still attached to the annoying bit of plastic. Zelthub set down a folder full of papers and sighed as he leaned back. His beady black eyes bored into Shaggy. But Shaggy just sighed and scratched the back of his head. Just an attempted mugging, huh? Zelthub asked. Shaggy shrugged. Yep. Zelthub sighed. You weren't going to mention the prison break? Well, technically, I didn't break myself out of prison. The walls came down, and I walked out. The prison had to be structurally unsound at that point. So, for my safety, I thought it best to leave. Pfft, right. Zelthub opened the folder on the table and spread the papers around. Shaggy was surprised to see they weren't about him. In fact, several of the papers had photos of fairly gruesome crime scenes, each with bloody body bits filling the area. Shaggy guessed they were glow-related incidents. Each image reminded him of what happened to Chuli at Callahan's. He glanced up at Zelthub to see the large demon studying him. "What do you see?" Shaggy shrugged again. "More glow victims, looks like." "Is it always so damn volatile?" "No, and that's what has some of us worried." "Worried enough to help a criminal?" Zelthub snorted loudly and black fire shot from his nostrils. "Please. You are hardly a master criminal. You got caught during a mugging, then escaped prison when a supervillain was doing a recruitment drive. Why didn't you join Delmond?" Shaggy raised an eyebrow in question, and Zelthub nodded understandingly. The soup that broke into the prison was an elemental wizard type, named Delmond Merle. "He didn't introduce himself?" "I'm sure he did," Shaggy said. "But I was a little occupied with the roof collapsing, so I wasn't paying much attention." Zelthub nodded and looked back down at the papers. "For some reason, this new batch of glow on the streets is a lot more volatile. Current efforts to find the cause have been stymied by an almost zealot-like behavior from the dealers. They aren't talking, and we're spread way too thin as it is. What with the anti-HLO soups everywhere and the recent attack from COG, the entire damn city is running on fumes." Shaggy stifled a yawn. "Wow, that's a thing. So about your deal?" Zelthub snapped his head up from the papers and grinned. "Do you really think this is a negotiation?" "Yep," Shaggy said, simply staring into the demon's black eyes. Shaggy just nodded. Players were going to be players, and some of them were going to run headfirst into a wall as many times as it took to break it down. But others were going to take it slow and steady. Those were the ones that were going to be a pain later. Especially if they got it into their heads that Undertown was a good place to farm XP. So we're trying everything we can to get more people on this. Even letting a few criminals take a whack at it." "Criminal," Shaggy corrected. "My friends are fine, upstanding citizens." Zelthub snorted and glared at Shaggy, but he just grinned at the demon. "Whatever. So here's the deal. You and your buddies hit the streets and start taking down suppliers. With minimal collateral damage." Zelthub jabbed a thick finger into the plastic table as he nearly yelled that last part. "That last part is non-negotiable. We need evidence and suspects, not burning buildings and dead bodies. Also, you will be fitted with a tracking device that'll let us know where you are at all times." Shaggy sighed loudly. "Then you better put me back in the box, Chief. I don't do well with collars." He really didn't need a leash on him. Especially from the police the morning before they were going to get up to some mayhem. That was non-negotiable. It had been something Vlad had brought up multiple times. If they were going to do this, they were going to want some autonomy from the police. Luckily, Ren had suggested a compromise. "Give me a few vests with audio and video support. When we go to work, we switch them on and record everything. From planning to execution. Then, when we are done, we turn over everything at a dead drop. Take our payment and new assignments and do it again." Zelthub sucked in a breath and glared at Shaggy angrily. "You've thought this through." Shaggy shrugged and sat back in his chair. Zelthub tapped the table a few times before he spoke. "I'll have to send it up the chain. But if it gets approved, the brass are still going to want assurances that you lot aren't out there running wild." "Ha ha ha ha." Shaggy couldn't help himself. He burst out laughing, and it took a full minute to get himself under control. "Sorry," Shaggy said, rubbing a tear from his eye. "But of course we are going to be running wild. However, I assure you, we are the lesser of two evils in this case." You understand I can't take your word on that, right? Zelthub said stoically. Shaggy nodded as he sighed and shrugged his shoulders. What choice do you have? Send me to jail? That's fine, I'll sit there happily. Maybe make some new friends, plan my eventual rule of the world. Or you can work with us and we can both benefit. Zelthub raised an eyebrow. Benefit? How do you and yours benefit? Shaggy mentally swore at himself. He and the others had planned to rob the druggies blind as they went about their business. Thinking quickly, Shaggy made something up. Well, we eliminate the competition and we show the locals that we aren't so bad. Right? Zelthub glared at Shaggy. Shaggy coughed and tried to maintain eye contact for as long as possible. He felt like those beady, black demon eyes were staring into his soul. But soon, Zelthub sighed and stood up. Shaggy sighed to himself and tried to stretch his legs. He briefly thought about breaking his legs out, but Zelthub interrupted his thoughts. I'll run it up the chain. Don't break anything while I'm gone. Shaggy grinned as the big demon moved toward the door. I make no promises. My legs are getting a little sore, you know? That reminds me, Zelthub turned with a hand on the door. How did you break your cuffs? Shaggy just grinned as Zelthub stared. Soon, the big demon snorted and threw open the door to the hallway. There was some shuffling of feet and the indistinct murmur of voices, but Shaggy ignored it. Hopefully, he would be out of here soon and they would have another source of income topside. A legit source of credits, from the actual police of all people. Shaggy grinned as he sat back in the chair. Whether he got shipped off to prison or they accepted the deal, he was having a wild time either way. I still want everything checked. Vlad said into the back of the van. He and Dave had apparently cut a square hole between the front seat and the back of their new surveillance van. They said it was so everyone could talk, but Shaggy thought it was more so Ren wouldn't die of heat exposure. The poor Paranadan was stuffed into the back with Slink, and with all the gear and equipment back there, it was a tight fit. Although the large stoic player took it all in stride. They were back at the Barton Estates. On the man-made hiking trail, just waiting. The sun was setting, and they still wanted to wait a few hours after nightfall to launch their raids. The van had been repainted and now looked more like a regular unmarked work van. Vlad had said they could grab various decals to put on the van later. So they could masquerade as various types of workers. It was a good idea, although Shaggy questioned getting rid of the park restoration sign on the side. We get it, Vlad. Slink called from the back. But there's only so much we can do. I really don't know how some of this stuff works. So finding whatever bugs the cops put on the equipment they gave Shags is going to take a while. But you're sure there were no audio bugs? Ren sighed loudly as Slink answered. Yes, Vlad. I told you we checked, and whatever type of bugs they have on these vests, they are not auditory. My guess is they are more concerned with tracking us. But you just said. Damn it, Vlad. Do you want to check? 'Cause you can walk your pale ass back here and go over this damn manual yourself. Slink shouted, annoyed. Vlad looked ready to say something, but Shaggy put his hand on his friend's shoulder. All right. The conversation about our new tack vests is done. We have done what we can and we can check them over again later. For now, let's focus on what we are doing tonight. Vlad sighed. Fine. But I still don't trust it. None of us do, dude. Ren said from the back. But we can only do what we can do. Besides, you heard Shaggy. He and his pack will handle all that stuff. Shaggy nodded as he gazed down at the darkening estates. Yeah, the cops actually set us up with several safe houses and dead drop locations. So we can bounce around as we please. Of course, those are all probably bugged to hell too, but that's something for the pack. And you really want to run around busting drug dealers? For the cops? Vlad asked, annoyed. It's a good side business. They are going to pay us to take out this glow operation. We can take what we want from the dealers and we'll get in good with the cops topside. Just be careful. That's a fine line to walk, especially for someone as impulsive as you. Ren said. A sleeping Dave shifted in the driver's seat as Shaggy turned to the opening in the van's cab. I'm not impulsive. I just prefer to simplify my problems. You see a wall, you go through the wall. No need to go looking for a bunch of tools or something. Some people would call that stubborn. Vlad muttered. Shaggy waved them off and addressed Slink. How's that photo still doing on the net? They keep taking it down, but people are still circulating it. Not just me either. It is a huge thing right now. The photo of Melanie leaving Drew Spiegel's house had caught on like wildfire. Of course, both camps claimed the visit was innocent. She was supposedly over to talk about a new deal with the dad. But few people believed that. People were more inclined to believe that the two wealthy people were up to no good. Given the fact that Drew was known for his sexual proclivities and that Melanie was the wife of a well-known member of the dad board, it seemed likely that something hinky was going on. They had their defenders, who Shaggy was sure were all paid off by either the dad or Drew and Melanie themselves. But for the most part, the net was roasting the pair alive. New photos even cropped up. The pair out at dinner, at the movies, walking closely while Melanie's husband was right in front of them. It seemed that the three had been close at one point. Although Melanie's husband, Sheldon, hadn't released a statement yet. The first thing their group had done when they parked the van here was listen in on an angry Drew. Drew was absolutely livid and blamed the entire thing on the estate's security. The guards informed the irate man-child that they were understaffed and it wasn't their job to monitor for photographers. Just to keep people out of the gated community. What followed was an intense series of screaming, inventive cursing, and even some pleading as Drew tried to call in every favor he could. But it was all for naught. The man was essentially persona non grata with everyone he knew. Shaggy suspected that the dad was behind some of it. A good deal of people weren't even taking the man's hollow calls. Instead, he left screaming messages, yelling about how the person owed him and he needed help. The few people that answered spent their time berating Drew. Not on what he did, but on the fact that he had gotten caught. After a few back-and-forth conversations, Drew finally stopped trying and started drinking and snorting every drug he had in his office. Fairly quickly, the man fell into a drug-induced sleep that Shaggy wasn't sure he would wake up from. But it made their job easier. Vlad stretched his arms forward as he sighed. And the other guy? Teo's still not doing anything. He was sunning himself, but as the sun went down, he moved inside and cooked himself dinner. Now he's relaxing on his couch and watch the news. Slink said. The sounds of the surveillance equipment filled Shaggy's ears as Slink worked the various machines. They had left a couple of drones on Drew, but after he passed out, they focused on Teo. The crime lord was disturbingly mundane. Aside from a few calls where he checked in on his people, the man went about his day like a wealthy businessman without a care in the world. I don't trust it, Shaggy said. Yeah, the man's too nonchalant. Vlad agreed. A loud snort emanated from the back of the van. How nervous are you in your own home? Shaggy nodded. Fair point. Still don't like it, though. Should we just hit Drew tonight? Dave snorted again as Shaggy shared a look with Vlad. The pale vampire just shrugged and Shaggy snorted. Whatever you say, boss man. Slink chuckled, but said nothing. The group fell into idle chit-chat about their day. Shaggy still had to calm Vlad's fears about the new deal with the Austin cops, but for the most part, the vampire seemed mollified. Shaggy knew it was going to be his ass in the fire, anyway. Well, his and his pack's, and maybe Ephemera if he could convince her to come topside. He wondered about adding her to the pack, which made him open his pack tab. See crass sources. Paranoid level 9. Personality dim-witted. Loyalty 98 out of 100. Pack bond increase 5%. Rita Crawford. Human level 8. Personality motherly. Loyalty 88 out of 100. Pack bond increase 5%. Tom Fash. Human level 6. Personality Jabberjaw. Loyalty 75 out of 100. Pack bond increase 5%. Sybil D. Dayan level 7. Personality Stoic. Loyalty 80 out of 100. Pack bond increase 5%. Vic Nash. Human level 7. Personality Combative. Loyalty 72 out of 100. Pack bond increase 5%. Surprisingly, his loyalty numbers had gone up. Apparently, leaving the kids alone to play made him more trustworthy for some reason. Maybe it was the fact that he trusted them to watch over things in his absence. Unfortunately, he was still limited to only 5 pack members, because he was still a young werewolf. He really hoped that was a time-based thing. Next he moved over to his lackey page, which was filled with the 50-something men and women that their little legion had picked up. But moving over to henchmen, he saw Ephemera was still listed as his number 1. Ephemera Nalic, number 1 henchman. Staffantum, level 12. Personality Chaotic. Loyalty 70 out of 100. It looked like his pack was in excellent hands, and they were probably more than ready to leave the dreary undertown behind and hunt in the city for a change. Shaggy could feel his blood boiling at the thought. Just him and his pack out hunting. Fun times. Dave, jolting awake next to him, snapped him out of his daydreaming. "How wah snort, are we there yet, dude?" Shaggy chuckled as he patted Dave's shoulder. "Almost, Dave. We're just waiting for it to get a little darker out. Actually, we can probably go now. We still have to search Drew's place. Which shouldn't be that hard with him in a drug coma," Slink said. Shaggy glanced between Vlad and a sleepy-eyed Dave. They both gave him nods, and they started getting out of the van. Which shifted as Ren and Slink jumped out of the back. They all took some time to stretch and mentally prepare themselves. But once everyone was ready, Ren hoisted Slink onto his back and put a finger up to his lips. The large gray alien took off toward the wall as the others all followed as quickly and quietly as they could. They had played with the idea of just flying the van into the gated community, but the limited sky lanes and the van's federal origins made that tricky. They didn't want to risk someone getting the van's code, and breaking away from a sky lane was a sure way to get pinged by someone. So once that was out, Shaggy suggested jumping the fence. Which, besides from being a sturdy and large brick fence, didn't seem to have any other security measures besides the cameras dotted around, which were easy to avoid. Ren was sure there were some other defenses, but one Dave test later, they discovered it was just a plain brick fence. Of course, Ren and Vlad chastised Dave. But Shaggy thought it was funny as hell. The blue-armored crazy man just jumped back and forth over the fence a few times until he was satisfied. The cameras whirred back and forth on a timer that was easy to move between. So they agreed to jump the fence and deal with the consequences. Which meant that Slink would have to be carried, and Ren was the only one big enough for the job. Shaggy and Vlad were sure they could carry the kid too, but not while jumping a fence. Dave's blue-armored form shot past Shaggy as they approached the fence. Shaggy sped up, as well as the sound of the whirring cameras filled the night. He saw 2 up ahead along the wall, whirring back and forth slowly. Dave seemed familiar with the timing, so Shaggy fell into a lope beside the man as Vlad's smoky form zipped ahead of them both. Soon Vlad's form hit the wall and then climbed up and over. With a mechanical-sounding grunt, Dave also left the ground. Which Shaggy took as his cue to leap as well. He and Dave soared through the air, the iron spikes above the brick fence just missing their legs. With a grunt and a roll, Shaggy caught himself in the grass just beyond the fence. Vlad was standing nearby, waiting. Dave was excitedly jumping from foot to foot, also watching the fence. Ren had assured them he could clear the fence, but they were all mildly concerned considering the large alien's massive body. But apparently, their worries were unfounded. Shaggy whistled softly as the massive Rhino Man's form sailed up and over the white brick fence. Slink was hanging on for dear life as they easily cleared the spike and landed just beyond the wall with a loud thud. Shaggy grit his teeth and looked at Vlad and Dave. Vlad was already gone, but Dave's blue-masked face was unreadable. Sighing, Shaggy took off at a lope, following his vampire friend. Soon he saw the black misty form of his friend zooming across street lamplit streets. Shaggy stuck to the shadows as much as possible as he ran for Drew Spiegel's house. Thankfully, the man's home was only a few blocks from the wall. The evening air whipped by as Shaggy ran through a few people's yards and in between their large mansions. Vlad's form whizzed over every obstacle in his way, and the thudding sounds of Dave's armored form and Ren's massive feet sounded behind him. Finally, Shaggy skidded to a stop in Drew's yard, right next to Vlad. Standing, Shaggy grinned at his friend and they both walked toward the front door. A hissing noise brought them up short and Shaggy noticed a small green snake right in front of the door. Soon, the hissing was joined by the thudding sound of Dave and Ren. Both slowed to a stop and Slink slid from Ren's back, rapidly waving at Shaggy and Vlad. Shaggy shrugged and moved over to Slink, who was standing on the sidewalk in front of the house. "What? Were you two just going to use the front door?" Slink hissed in a whisper. Shaggy and Vlad shared a look before they both nodded. Slink slapped himself in the face before he pointed toward the door. Vlad hissed in realization, but it took Shaggy a few extra seconds. There was a small camera built just above the door. Ren looked at both of them sadly and shook his head. Shaggy sighed and turned back to Slink. "Okay. So what's the plan?" Slink squinted his eyes and muttered, "Give me a second." Shaggy wasn't sure what the kid was doing until he saw movement near the front door. 2 green snakes were slithering their way into the house. Shaggy nodded as he realized what the kid was doing. He and the others waited, each full of adrenaline and ready to begin. Dave and Shaggy jumped on the balls of their feet as Ren and Vlad shifted excitedly. Soon Slink hissed and came out of his trance-like state. "Go go go," he whispered as he rushed for the door. Shaggy and the others followed, rushing across the manicured lawn. He was sure he heard a loud beep as they got close to the door. Slink was already there and pushing his way inside as the others each followed, one after the other. Shaggy noticed Larry and Curly curled around an electronic keypad on the wall. He wasn't sure if they had shorted it or inputted the numbers, but with Slink's snakes, it could have been either. "Okay, split up. Shags, you follow me upstairs. You restrain Drew while I poke around up there. The rest of you search down here. Quietly," Slink ordered. Shaggy and the others looked at each, but they all shrugged and followed the kid's orders. He followed Slink up the stairs to the second floor and down the hall. Drew had collapsed in his office, so that was their first stop. As they entered, Slink threw Shaggy a soft bit of black cloth. Confused, Shaggy lifted it up in question, but Slink was already searching the office. It took a second, but soon Shaggy understood that the black cloth was a hood. Something to cover Drew's head. Shaggy moved over to the large man passed out in his office chair. Drew's chest was raising and falling slowly, signifying that the drugged-out business owner wasn't dead. Shaggy wondered what the guy's tolerance level was for him to not be outright dead. But he quickly shook it off and threw the black hood over the man's head and started searching for something to tie him up with. Shaggy grimaced as he found a drawer full of whips, chains, leather cuffs, and even a ball gag. He lifted the black and red ball gag as Slink tossed the office. "Think this is for him or her?" Shaggy asked. Slink turned and looked. It took the kid a few seconds to decipher what he was seeing. But as soon as he did, he shook his head and continued his search. Shaggy chuckled softly and used the cuffs to secure Drew to the office chair. If they were lucky, the drugged-out asshole would think he had passed out while getting lucky. "Jackpot," Slink whispered, drawing Shaggy's attention. The boy was crouched low on the floor, next to the wooden panel of the wall. He had somehow pushed a piece of the lower wall aside. On the other side was a small metal safe. Shaggy moved over to help as Slink looked over the keypad and knob on the safe. Shaggy crouched down to his knees and asked. We getting the snakes, or you want me to see if I can cut it? Slink bit his lip before he answered. Think you can cut it? Shaggy shifted his right hand into his claws and pushed one through the seam in the safe. He felt the metal of the lock fight him for a few seconds, and he had to push, but soon he was through. The safe's keypad sparked slightly, and Shaggy and Slink held their collective breaths. After a few seconds of nothing happening, they both exhaled and Slink pulled the safe door open. Inside were more drugs and a few data slates covered in multicolored crystals from the few drug vials that had spilled over. Slink sighed and pulled the data slates out, leaving the drugs. Shaggy shrugged and waited. Slink swiped his finger along the slates until he saw something and grinned. Okay, this will do. Let's go. Sure we don't want to search the rest of this floor? Could be more stuff to steal. Slink shook his head. No, we still have to hit Teo, remember? I don't want to do that while carrying a bunch of stuff. We could run it back to the van, Shaggy said. Slink shrugged and got up from the floor. A snort from the unconscious Drew brought their attention around, but soon the man mumbled incoherently and settled back down. Shaggy followed Slink out of the room and back downstairs. Ran and the others were still turning over the living room and the kitchen, but Slink waved silently for attention. Once he had it, he pointed to the 2 data slates he had and gave the OK signal. Dave returned the OK sign as Vlad and Ren walked over. Is that it? Vlad asked. Slink nodded as Shaggy said. All we need. On to the next one, said Ren. Dave's armored footsteps clanked along the floor as they marched toward the front door. Soon enough, they were back outside and Shaggy saw Slink place the slates behind his back and into his pants. He was sure there was a better place for those, but the boy took off toward Teo Santos' house before Shaggy could say anything. He shared a look with the others, but soon they were all jogging toward their next destination. Shaggy wondered if this next stop would be as easy, but something in his gut told him it wouldn't be. Teo's mansion was a neo-modern nightmare of steel and glass. It was built into a small hill and had a large glass patio with a pool. Steel girders held the pool up over the slope of the hill. Glass windows overlooked everything and the faux-wood roof was some weird dark and gray lumber. They all took a few seconds as they stood out in front of Teo's house. Shaggy could see Slink clenching and opening his fist. The boy was obviously spoiling for a fight. How we doing this? Ren asked. Loud in, loud out? Slink shook his head at Shaggy. Quiet as we can. If we have to go loud, we go loud. But if we go loud, someone has to get back to the van. We don't want to lose it. On it. Vlad said. The others agreed, as the vampire was the fastest of them. Plan made, they marched toward the front door. Larry and Curly slithering their way in and opening the door for them. The cool air conditioning hit their faces as they entered a small foyer. Large archways flanked the doorway on either side, and Shaggy instinctively took the right one. He heard the others follow, and soon they were in Teo's wide living room. The kitchen was visible just beyond. Shaggy went to move, but a bright light suddenly assaulted his eyes, and he heard the others scream in shock. Blinking away the spots as fast as he could, Shaggy figured out that someone had turned on the lights and was giving them the chance to see again. Once the others collected themselves, a man stepped out of the kitchen. Teo smiled benignly at them as he took in their faces. You know, you do this job long enough and you get a sense of when you are being watched. It is a skill that has served me well in all my years of doing business. Shaggy growled, but didn't shift yet. No sense in showing his hand. The others spread out around the living room, looking to encircle Teo. Teo grinned at them again. Would you mind telling you who you are before I capture you? Dave's armored form shuffled excitedly from foot to foot as he adopted his hero persona. Never evildoer. You shall face the wrath of justice. Teo shook his head and sighed. Vigilantes. Turning slightly, Teo snapped his fingers and the space between the kitchen and living was filled with a bright light. A white oblong winked into existence, and 4 people stepped out of it. A green alien man in leather armor, a human woman in a blouse and jeans, a short brown-skinned man in some sort of jumpsuit, and light blue androgynous alien. They all grinned happily at Shaggy and his friends. "Oh, boss, what little fishes have you caught?" the woman purred, glancing at all of them. "Paranaiden," the green alien said, simply squaring up across from Ren. "Couple muties too," said the squat man across from Shaggy. Shaggy growled again and crouched low. Whatever was about to happen was going to be a pain in the ass. Slink and the others squared up with their targets. Leaving Dave looking at Teo, his armor face plate turned to Slink, and the boy gave the excitable man a nod. "Go on, take care of Teo. We got the others," Slink shouted, using Dave's hero name. "Woo-woo," Dave shouted, launching forward. Then all hell broke loose. Shaggy sprang forth as soon as he saw Dave move. Unfortunately, the woman thrust a hand out toward them both. Dave shrugged off whatever ability she used, but Shaggy was stuck in midair, held there by some invisible force. His enhanced focus caught Vlad rushing forward as Ren tossed a coffee table at their enemies. Slink seemed frozen, but that might have been because he was releasing his other snake, Mo. "Blue one's loose," shouted the short guy in a jumpsuit. "Busy," said the woman and the green man. The woman still had her hand held out toward Shaggy, and he could feel her hold tighten slightly. Meanwhile, the green man casually caught the coffee table and flung it aside. That done, the alien rushed Ren, arms up and ready to fight. Shaggy saw a blue-black blur whizzing around the room and guessed that Vlad was caught by a speedster. Shaggy tried to twist and turn, but he couldn't get any traction in midair. There was a brief flash of red light and Shaggy grunted as something slammed into his chest and he was ripped out of the air. He flew backward, colliding with the far wall and smashing into the TV mounted there. "There. It's done. Help the boss," Jumpsuit ordered. "I had him, asshole," the woman yelled back. But before the man could answer, the woman screamed. Shaggy pulled himself up and checked the surroundings. Ren and the green alien were exchanging massive haymakers as Vlad was blurring about the room with the light blue alien blurring with him. Mo was attached to the slim woman's torso and Jumpsuit was trying to peel him off. Slink was hiding behind a couch and Dave was gone. Shaking himself off, Shaggy dove for Jumpsuit. Claws out, he swiped them downward, right where the man's arms were trying to pull at Mo. But the man nimbly dodged backward and Shaggy's claws cut air. Readjusting, Shaggy sliced his right arm out as he brought his left claw up. But Jumpsuit dodged again and brought up a red glowing hand. Shaggy braced himself as a ball of energy left the man's hand and hit him in the upper arm. Shaggy felt his skin burn, but he ignored it as he tried to stab forward again with his right claws. The energy ball was pretty powerful, but since he wasn't in the air, the pushback was non-existent. He felt his skin regrowing as he followed the dodging short man. He was pretty nimble as he kept backing away from Shaggy's blows. "Pain in the ass," shouted Jumpsuit as he turned his open palm into a finger gun. The red energy blast became focused on Jumpsuit's finger and alarm bells went off in Shaggy's brain. He skidded back just as a red laser beam cut right where his leg had been. The bolt went straight through the floor and left a black smoking hole. Jumpsuit cackled as he tried for another. But Shaggy dove in again, aiming high and low. His left claw went for the man's knee as his right went for the stomach. Jumpsuit got his leg out of the way, but not his body. Shaggy's claws hit flesh, and he jammed them as deep as he could before Jumpsuit jumped backward. "MHM." The woman's scream back was muffled as her face and upper arms were covered by Mo's orange form. Jumpsuit swore again, but then Shaggy was on him, slicing his claws. Jumpsuit tried to get out of the way again, but he was moving slower now. Shaggy clipped him on his leg and arm before Jumpsuit released another red blast and made Shaggy brace. He ate the blast, and he felt his skin burn. He was about to attack again when a sharp pain hit his leg and it gave out under him. Shaggy went down to a knee and glanced up to see Jumpsuit grinning. He had used his big energy blast to mask a small laser from his other pointer finger. Shaggy urged his knee to repair itself, but Jumpsuit was moving closer, both hands outstretched and glowing. He was gearing up for a big attack. Thinking quickly, Shaggy dove forward as best he could and sliced upward with his claws. He felt them cleave through Jumpsuit's hands. Arfha! Jumpsuit screamed in pain as his hands fell to the floor. Shaggy's knee finished healing, and he stood just as Jumpsuit keeled over, screaming and bleeding. Spinning, he saw the light blue alien pummeling Vlad into the floor with super fast punches. Mo was still wrapped around the woman, but she had gotten an arm free and was trying to stab the snake with a long dagger. Slink was on her arm, trying to stop her. Ran and the green guy had taken their fight out to the patio, and the rhino man was curled in on himself, blocking the smaller man's haymakers. Shaggy moved to help Vlad, but the two speedsters suddenly disappeared. They reappeared with Vlad pinning the blue guy against the wall, jamming his nails into the alien's chest. Deciding that Vlad was fine, Shaggy rushed to help Ren. Slink and the snake seemed to have the woman dealt with. Shaggy bounded over the sofa and through a shattered glass pane to the patio. Ren was on his knees, getting buffeted by the alien's blows. Shaggy got his legs under him and pounced onto the green guy's back. He felt his claws dig into the alien's shoulder and back. The green alien grunted in pain and stopped punching Ren. His slim green arms reached backward and Shaggy dug in deeper. But Ren threw himself at the green man and grabbed his arms. Shaggy did just that as the green alien wrenched his arms free and jammed a fist into Ren's eye. Ren cried out in pain and fell to a knee. Shaggy dragged both sets of his claws through the green man's throat. The alien coughed and gurgled as he tried to breathe, but his throat was ruined completely. Shaggy fell to the patio deck. But, abruptly, the green man kicked out harshly, slamming his foot into Ren's body. The big gray alien was tossed back and over the side of the patio and to the hillside below. Shaggy got one look at Ren's surprised face before his friend disappeared. The green alien collapsed as a pool of blood stained the deck. Shaggy sighed and ran back inside. Mo was on the floor now, bleeding from several cuts. Slink had the knife and was trying to gut the woman, who had a hand up and was using whatever telekinetic powers she had to stop the boy. Vlad was wrapped around the blue alien, fangs out. He was bleeding from multiple wounds on his face and body. Shaggy bounded over to Slink and the woman and jammed his claws into her back. She didn't even have time to scream as she lost her psychic hold on Slink. The boy went to work with the dagger, jabbing it into the woman's stomach repeatedly. Shaggy finally had to grab the boy's arm and yank him away. "She's dead, kid. It's over." Slink came away and stared at Shaggy with an angry and manic look. "She killed Mo." Shaggy sighed. "Your snake will be fine. We still need to get Teo." Slink looked like he was going to argue, but a thump from behind them brought them both around. Vlad was slumped over in the living room, right next to the blue speedster. Shaggy swore under his breath and slid over to his friend and checked him over. But Vlad's body broke into motes of light and vanished. Shaggy turned to see Slink crouched over Mo. The orange snake was weakly slithering up the kid's arm, probably trying to re-enter the kid's body to rest. Slink sighed as he picked up Mo. Shaggy saw Larry and Curly slither into the kid's pant legs, and he coughed to get Slink's attention. "Come on, kid. We ain't done yet." Slink shuddered a bit as Mo disappeared into his shirt. "Okay." Dave went that way. Slink pointed over his shoulder toward a hallway just beside the kitchen. It looked like Teo had made a run for it. Shaggy nodded and led the way down the hall. Along the way, there were indents in the ground where Dave's armored form left footprints. The guy was going all out. They followed the trail all the way to a back door and out into the hills beside Teo's house. The footprints continued over the next hill and onto the road. They lost the footprints at that point, but Shaggy used his nose to follow Dave's scent further down the road until they started seeing signs of a fight. Cars were dented, street lights were cut in half, and some people's front yards were torn up. Shaggy sighed as he looked around. So much for doing this quietly. They continued to jog down the road until Slink called out. There. Down the road, under a streetlight, was a body hunched over. It looked to be Dave's blue form, and Shaggy swore as he picked up speed. Slink fell behind as Shaggy rushed over. Under the light, Dave's kneeling body was holding onto a terrified-looking Teo. Dave had his hands wrapped around the man's throat. Shaggy almost sighed in relief, but then he saw a slim blade was penetrating Dave's armored chest. Shaggy moved forward carefully and looked both men over. Slink skid to a halt nearby as Shaggy tapped Teo. The man was frozen in a rictus of fear. Dave had been stabbed through the chest and, in a last-ditch effort, choked Teo to death. Shaggy whistled under his breath as he looked over the bodies. Dave's form turned into motes of light and Teo's body slumped to the road. Shags? Slink said behind him, sounding weak. Slink coughed and Shaggy spun. No, Shags. I think that woman's dagger was poisoned or something. Slink was paler than usual and had just coughed up some blood. It ran down the front of the boy's shirt. Shit. Shaggy swore and dove for the boy. What the hell? I didn't see you get cut. Slink shook his head. Not me. Mo. Mo's poisoned. Well then, dump the snake. Shaggy yelled. Slink got an angry look on his face. Hell no. If I dump him, I'll lose him and have to retrain another one. I like Mo. If we both die, then I'll respawn with all my snakes. Stubborn bastard. Shaggy swore as he turned and put the kid on his back. Hold on. Shaggy's voice shifted as his body twisted and grew. He could feel the hairs on his body sprout as he went down on all fours. His paws grew and his face elongated. All was normal with his werewolf form until he felt two horns grow out of his head. Slink's hands gripped his fur tightly and Shaggy shook the pain from his body. Did your fur always used to be black? Slink asked weakly, but Shaggy ignored him. The sound of whirring drones filled the air and Shaggy bolted away on all fours. His ears picked up the distant sounds of sirens, so they needed to be gone. Shaggy ran through the streets as fast as his four-legged form would go. He barely noticed the white wall of the community as he jumped over it, and he didn't even care about the cameras. He tore into the hiking trail and up the hill toward their van. Shaggy was rapidly trying to think of a place to take Slink for healing when he spotted something near their van. He skidded to a halt and sniffed the air, but all he got was earth and sweat. There was a dark shadow right next to their van and whatever it wasn't moving. Shaggy crawled closer, trying to make out anything, when a voice called. Shags, that you? Shaggy bolted forward and slid to a stop in front of Ren. The Rhino Man was leaning against the van and looked beat to hell. One of his massive arms was at an odd angle, too. Ren looked Shaggy over with wide eyes, before he chuckled. Shit, next time let's just send you in there. It is mildly terrifying. Slink coughed from Shaggy's back. Shaggy spun and let Slink slide/fall from his back. After he heard the thump, Shaggy shifted back. He idly noticed that his pants shifted with him this time, his shirt long destroyed. But he didn't have time to celebrate as Slink coughed up more blood. Rushing to the van, he threw the back doors open and started searching inside. There's no first aid kit back there. Slink said. Shaggy swore. Shit. Then we need to get you two to a healer or something. Slink sighed. I'm dead, Shaggy. I'll respawn in Undertown with the others. Shit. Ren said. The others are dead? Dave took out Teo before he died. I don't know what got Vlad though. Probably blood loss or something, Shaggy explained. We'll ask them when we get down there. We are done topside for now. If Slink is headed for spawn, you can drive while I rest in the back. Shaggy sighed and nodded when an unfamiliar voice interrupted them. Or you could ask for help. The boy was looking a hell of a lot better as purple motes of light surrounded his body. Shaggy shifted his gaze between the healed Slink and the obsidian-skinned newcomer. Ren lurched forward a few steps, but Shaggy imposed himself between Ren and the woman. Who are you? Why help us? The woman scowled and whipped a hand across Shaggy's face. The blow didn't even register for Shaggy, but the woman hissed as she rubbed her palm. You've always been hard-headed, but that's twice now you've failed to recognize me. Minus 200 points. She declared angrily. Shaggy's eyes widened. T? An enormous grin spread across his wife's elven face. I said I was sorry, T. Shaggy said as he pulled the van into a different skylane. It's malevolent or levy for short in game. You should respect in-game etiquette. Yes, dear. Levy shot him an angry look, but Shaggy just grinned. She could be as angry as she wanted, but he was just happy she was here. His feeling must have shown on his face, because hers softened. Shaggy chuckled as he angled the van toward downtown Austin. Getting away from the estates had been fairly easy, but Shaggy didn't want to relax until they were closer to the city. Loads of police and drones were about, and he could only hope none of them scanned their damn van. They were headed to Undertown anyway, but better safe than sorry. How do you not recognize your own wife? Slink asked from the back seat for the millionth time. Levy raised an eyebrow at Shaggy, who could only groan. For the last time? She looks entirely different. She can't look that different. The game's character creator won't allow it. Unless you choose an alien race with like tentacles or something. Ren said. Unhelpful. Well, I am taller, and the skin tone is vastly different. Not to mention the hair. Levy said. See? That's practically everything. Levy snorted. Everything about my looks. But the fact you couldn't look into my eyes and see the very soul of your wife is wounding. Shaggy merely groaned. I knew it was you immediately, you know. Levy said. I look exactly the same. The same as you did a few years ago maybe. Shaggy simply ignored the jab and continued. Anyway, you're here now. So why didn't you do all this yesterday? Haha. Well, for one, I had to take you down a peg. Not every woman who approaches you in a bar is hitting on you, you know? Arg. I get that, but you still could have introduced yourself then. Levy smiled. But your embarrassed face was so cute. Also, I was a little angry about you not recognizing me. She wiped a non-existent tear from her cheek. Sniff. I had all these ideas about our joyous and tearful reunion. Pfft. You were planning some prank, weren't you? Levy merely smiled and Shaggy shook his head. Slink asked another question from the back of the van. He and Ren were all healed up and relaxing, while Shaggy rode up front with his wife. So are you a wizard or something? Levy shook her head, although the boy couldn't see her. Nope. Sorceress. One of the great evil sorceresses under the Mad Witch Corrigan. Who's this Mad Witch? Shaggy asked. Levy deflated slightly. Come on. The Mad Witch? Big evil lady with a screw loose? Was part of the tutorial event when the game started? I was dealing with my broken mutation. Shaggy said. I was fighting robots. Ren answered. I was occupied. Slink muttered. Shaggy thought back to Slink's friends and how they tricked him into playing and then abandoned him. He was probably being arrested when the tutorial even was going on. Or maybe that happened later. Levy raised an eyebrow at Shaggy. She probably picked up on the boy's subdued tone, but Shaggy shook his head and mouthed later. Nodding, his wife continued. Well, she's a regular supervillain. She's pretty big in the Austin area. At least, she was until she was captured and thrown into a magical prison. But several of us malicious magical folk set about breaking her out. Levy grinned at the memory, and Shaggy was happy to see his wife had been having fun while they took turns in the pod. How long did that take? Ren asked. Not too long really. There were already a group of NPC cultists trying to break out their master. Us players just helped. We gathered materials for the spell and fought off the cops and heroes while the cultists did the heavy spell work. But once Corrigan was free, that's when things got interesting. Shaggy could feel his wife vibrating with excitement on the seat next to him, but it was Slink who asked. How? She has her own pocket dimension. Levy declared happily. Shaggy just raised an eyebrow as Ren coughed awkwardly from the back of the van. Guh, you non-magical folk. Levy bemoaned good-naturedly. Please enlighten us, oh magical mistress. Shaggy grinned. Humph. It means that she is in charge of her own mini-world. It has its own shops and trainers, and even has a small area where we can farm XP. Although it is mostly for low-level players. What does she get out of it? Magical power. The more magical people aligned with Corrigan, the stronger her realm becomes. She takes a portion of your mana every morning to fund the space. Kind of like a tax. What about the non-magical people? Levy grinned. They pay actual taxes to Corrigan. She runs the place like a queen, and the players that have aligned themselves with her have begun to build up her realm. There was even talk of building a magic school for us villainous types. It is so cool. Shaggy smiled as it reminded him of Undertown. But probably more well-protected. He didn't want to think about the number of robots or people it would take to invade a magical dimension. Slink also must have thought similarly, because he spoke up. Sounds like Undertown, although probably with better defenses. Levy shook her head. Not really. Corrigan is weak right now, so she is just sitting back and gaining power. In fact, some bastard recently broke into the realm and started demanding shit from her. Who? Shaggy and his friends all asked at once. Some guy named Cog. Apparently he's hot shit out here, but he was furious with Corrigan. Word is she went back on their deal or something. Shaggy stomped on the brakes and left the car in hover as he stared across at his wife. Multiple cars started to honk and swerve around him in the skylane, but he ignored them as he asked. Cog is in Corrigan's dimension? Levy glanced at the hover cars going around them and sighed. Dear. Fly the car first, please. Shaggy grumbled as he took his foot off the brake and continued toward Austin. To answer your question. No. Cog left as soon as he talked to the Corrigan. Rumor is he got the answers he needed and left. Ideas? Shaggy asked through the hole in the van's wall, separating the front from the back. Slink hummed idly. Maybe something went wrong with his spell? I was there, Slink. The spell went off without a hitch. But what about the cost? What did he have to pay? Said Ren. He died. Shaggy deadpanned. We both did. Sorry, T. It's just I have history with Cog. Bloody history and a quest to take his ass to a blood god. Splain. Levy said as she sat back. Shaggy joined the traffic going into the city and navigated the skylanes as he told the story. The traffic was thankfully light as he flew around large buildings and various antennae. The skylanes were much more regulated in the city. One swerve off the lane would see your car seized up and put into emergency mode. Then your ass would be walking. The car would land itself and lock up for an hour or two. Which was why there weren't a lot of hovercar chases. Although a few flying jackasses liked to speed overhead every now and again. Shaggy was finishing his story as he adjusted the car for a landing and got ready to turn into an alleyway. The entrance to the Undertown tunnel was just big enough to accommodate the van, and once they were inside it would widen even further. What worried Shaggy was the Quinnica guarded the exit into Undertown itself. But that was something they could get into later. We taking the van down? Ren asked incredulously. Or they could talk about it now. Shaggy stopped his story to answer. Yes. There's a chance some of the cops at Barton Creek scanned it, so we should take it down. The Quinnica aren't going to like this. There was some errant grumbling from the back of the van, but Shaggy continued telling his wife about his dealings with Cog, including the invasion of Undertown and his most recent mission from Zang the Blood God. He finished as they were traveling down the dark tunnel to Undertown, and his wife whistled sharply. Wow. You've been busy, huh? He's a trouble magnet is what he is. Ren complained. But doesn't that make the game that much more fun? Levy laughed. He, yeah it does. Shaggy chuckled. But now I have to find Cog and find a way to beat and banish him to Zang's realm. All within 2 months. I can get some of my witches on it. Levy offered. You got witches? Levy snorted. They're my friends. I met them while trying to free for Corgan. They are other players with magical archetypes. Good girls. Levy slipped a silver device from her pant pocket and tapped its surface. A screen popped up, but Levy's face scrunched in annoyance as she tapped the device again and again. Shaggy chuckled as he watched his wife fiddle with her phone. Love, we are deep underground. The thing probably doesn't work. Huh? Oh no, it works. It just none of my friends are on right now. The van shifted as Ren moved his face near the opening. You have a phone that can work in Undertown? Levy waved her slim communicator at him. Magically enchanted and untraceable. Trill did it for me in exchange for some magical components. Had to pull a few eyes from some demon bats, but it was well worth it. Communication is one Undertown biggest pains. That and transportation. Slink's muffled voice said. Just having something to communicate with our people would be great. Especially if we are topside. Which you will be, remember? Ren said. I know. Levy gave him a curious look, but he waved a hand as they pulled their van toward the exit of the tunnel. The lights of Undertown were visible just beyond the opening. But several Quinnica were manning a chain-link gate. They were speaking to the various people and vehicles entering Undertown, and Shaggy saw more than a few people arguing loudly with the space vampires. Shaggy growled and shifted his right hand into claws as a pale woman walked over to his window. Shaggy lowered the window and glowered at the Quinnica. She looked a little surprised, and then her eyes narrowed. Wolf, she said simply. Apparently his reputation preceded him. Shaggy grinned and said. Parasite. The woman's face got even uglier look as it twisted into a look of rage. She looked ready to order an attack when Levy leaned over Shaggy's lap. His wife gently pushed on his shoulder and chided him. Dear, stop aggravating the nice lady. She's just doing her job, aren't you, honey? Shaggy wondered what his wife was doing. He was sure the Quinnica was going to shout at Levy, but instead the Quinnica shook her head a few times, then smiled. Yes. She said. Yes, ma'am. I'm just doing my job. Shaggy could see the dead-eyed look from the Quinnica woman. As he tried to figure out what was going on, his wife whispered. But we're all good here, right? You can let us through? The Quinnica woman nodded idly. Yes. Yes, ma'am, you can go on through. The woman raised a hand and the gate started to open. Shaggy gave his wife an open-mouthed stare, but she just waved a hand imperiously. Drive, husband. Shaggy could see the small impish smile on his wife's face. He just shook it off and drove the van through the gate. He wasn't sure how long what his wife had done would last, but he didn't want to chance it. He squeezed his van onto the nearest road and took off toward the bar. Undertown's roads were horrible for driving. They twisted and turned at odd angles. Some of them were way too skinny for any kind of vehicle, and the local population would often fill the streets to capacity. The fact that it was nighttime didn't help things at all. At night is when Undertown came alive. Topside workers and other refugees who should have been asleep at this hour were out and about. Drinking, gambling, whoring, or even all three. It was a town built for excess, and if you needed the drugs or food to keep going, you could probably find it in Undertown. They saw a couple of tough-looking thugs fighting off a few cog robots, but Shaggy didn't recognize them. As far as he knew, they were getting close to their territory. But maybe the local population had taken to cleaning up the remaining bots themselves. Undertown may have been full of the downtrodden and criminals, but it was also full of tough bastards. Shaggy grinned as he swerved around a couple of assholes in the street. "You like it here?" Levy said. "You know me, love. I got a soft spot for the little guy." His wife just smiled and put her head on his shoulder. Their passage through Undertown went completely unmolested. But when they finally made it to the square around the bar, Shaggy had to stop the van. It seemed like every time he came back to the square, there were more and more people. This time was no exception, but what made things even more surprising was the bar. The squat 2-story bar they had when they'd left was now replaced by a sturdy-looking 3-story structure. It even had a new, neon, green sign in the shape of a snake. The Viper's Den was packed. People were scattered across the square, sitting, standing, eating, and talking. Shaggy turned the van off and spoke toward the back. "You two are going to want to see this." The van shifted as Ren and Slink got out. Shaggy heard Ren swear as Slink sputtered. The mass of people drowned out the words. But Shaggy was sure both his friends were questioning what happened. He looked down at his wife, who was grinning at the spectacle outside the window. "Nice place." She pulled herself up and smiled warmly at Shaggy. "Do you think they are ready for the two of us?" "Huh." Shaggy barked a laugh as he held his wife's hand. "Hell no. But we are going to have a shit ton of fun anyway." The den was packed. People were seated all throughout the first and second floor. Shaggy was surprised to see that not only had the second floor been expanded, but it also had a few tables and chairs. They had only been gone a few days, but Petra and Ephemera had put in a lot of work. The green-scaled woman was behind the bar rapidly taking orders and managing a few fresh faces, like she was a field general. Ephemera had been downstairs doing the same with the criminal aspects. They were seated at a table just beside the dance floor. Although not too many people were dancing. The stage was still being built, and most of their clientele seemed more inclined to drink and eat, anyway. But more than a few people were using the space to just mill about talk. Levy smiled at everything and everybody as they sat in silence while waiting for their food. Shaggy was impressed by the selection the bar had got a hold of. It wasn't much past the standard bar and grill fare, but it seemed to be doing very well. The various Minotaur staff members had propelled the Viper's Den into practical legitimacy. It even looked like they had regular staff now and weren't reliant on lackeys and thugs to do their grunt work. "It's impressive," Levy said. Shaggy nodded. "Yeah. We put a lot of work into it and we have good people working with us. This whole Undercity seems so post-apocalyptic. You know? Like that one game." "Huh." Shaggy laughed. "Right? I kinda thought the same thing when I first came down here. But Undertown is a great place for us small-time crooks to get away from the big supervillains topside." Levy grinned. "True. But don't you think it would be easier to just join a villain?" "Sure, but if you do that, then you're little more than a lackey in that villain's organization. Expendable, and you have to work your way up their ranks. Which is fine if you want to go that route. But if you want to build something yourself, Undertown's the place to do it." "I think you just called me a lackey." Levy narrowed her purple eyes. Shaggy recognized the faux angry look in his wife's eyes. He smiled, showing off his sharp teeth. "If the magical slipper fits. You're lucky we don't have any fries or onion rings for me to throw at you." "I can get you some," Petra's voice said as the green-scaled woman walked up to their table. She had a large wooden tray with 2 ceramic plates on it. Shaggy could smell his own burger and the soup his wife had ordered. Petra set the tray down and distributed the food. As she did, she eyed Levy suspiciously. The first server had also given his wife the side eye, along with a few others. "Petra. This is my wife, Levy." Levy, this is the individual in charge of the Denver. Our business manager, as it were. Petra's reptilian features relaxed, if only a little. Charmed. Levy gave the stern-looking woman her best smile. Likewise. But shouldn't you be doing more office work? Do we need more staff? I can call some people. Shaggy grinned at his wife's use of the word we, and Petra groaned loudly. Arg. I know, but paperwork is so boring, and during these late-night rushes, I can get away with jumping behind the bar and taking a few orders. Besides, the new staff are still a little jumpy around the more wild members of our clientele. How's Blue? Shaggy asked around a mouthful of food. He kicked a chair out from their table, indicating that Petra should sit. Petra glanced at Levy and waited for an okay before she sat down. Don't speak with your mouth full, love. Levy chided. Mr. Blue has been fantastic at our more community-centric task. He was instrumental in getting some of our regular staff, and he brokered the deal with the Brute clan for some food. That explains the cow, Shaggy said, waving his burger. Anything business-wise I should be made aware of? Ran and the others are indisposed, and Slink has gone back to handling the other side of the business. Petra glanced around before sighing. There was no actual way for them not to be heard in such a crowded room. Shaggy shrugged, but Levy waved her hand as purple sparks emitted from her fingertips. When she was done, there was a slight pop and Shaggy immediately noticed the surrounding chatter become muffled. Petra grinned at Levy. You useful. It's why he keeps me around. That and the SE. Ow. There was a loud thump as his wife slammed her pointed shoe into his shin. Petra looked at him and sighed loudly. His wife merely glared. But Shaggy took another bite of his burger and grinned happily. Well, we've had a few overtures from the Quinnica. Standard obey or die stuff. Although they've gone quiet for the past few days. We have the guards on alert. The Brute clan has asked for some help with patrolling their western border. Ify sends them a few of the newbies. We've also had a few civilians asking about expanding the square. Maybe setting up some shops and things. Shaggy raised an eyebrow. We have the workforce for that? Petra shrugged. I don't really know, boss. I haven't looked in on that side of the business much. Getting this place up to standard has taken a lot of my time. Need a break? We can have someone else pick up some slack for ya. Petra looked aghast. I didn't say I was overworked. Shaggy took a long draw from his beer. I never said you were. But Ephemera looked like she'd been through the ringer. I was just wondering if you needed some help. Pfft. I've got this side of things down. Ify's the one managing a bunch of rowdy thugs. She had to put down 2 insurrections while you were gone. Of course, that pack of yours helped. Shaggy noticed his wife mouth the word pack at him and realized he still hadn't properly told her about his power set. He smiled at her and continued to question Petra. Anything we should be worried about? Shaggy asked. Petra shook her head. Nah. They were dealt with. Permanently. Shaggy nodded. He would have been more surprised if there hadn't been some kind of revolt while they were gone. All the heads leaving at the same time? Probably not a good look. But hey, maybe it flushed out some riffraff. Levy waved a hand at him, annoyed, and he and Petra turned. I don't mean to sound rude, but could you hurry the hell up? Holding a barrier spell in place is a mana drain. Not a huge one, but it is getting uncomfortable. Petra nodded apologetically and rushed out. Last, there was an older gentleman looking for all of you. He even hired a few of our guys for something. Shaggy raised a quizzical eyebrow. Older gentleman? Vance? No. I think his name was Obadiah. Shaggy had to rack his brain for a few seconds before the image of the lanky old man came to him. He and Vlad had met the guy at the Brute clan mansion. Shaggy vaguely remembered him offering them work. Once he nodded, Petra continued. He seems to hang out with the Brute clan, but we can't get a read on him. Ephemera wanted to check him out herself, but clerical work stopped her. Shaggy shook his head. Something told him that Obadiah was a high-level NPC. He would probably sniff her out in a second. Even with her phasing ability. The sudden onrush of sound and his wife letting out a breath like she had been holding it for a while signaled that the noise-canceling spell was over. He gave his wife a grateful look as Petra stood. "That's all for now, boss. I recommend you check in with your pack. They are getting antsy." "Oh, don't worry. They are going to be very busy in the future." Petra merely nodded as she walked back toward the bar. Shaggy raised his empty beer glass and a nearby server nodded. Levy set about eating her own food. Holding the barrier had apparently not allowed her to do much else but sit there. Shaggy grinned at his wife, who was eating her soup in a rush. "You know, it's not going to run away from you." Levy just glared at him over her spoon, and he shut up. Better to let her get some food in her stomach. As she did, he checked his pack bond and searched around. Rita was somewhere in the bar, while Seacrass and Tom were downstairs. Vic and Sybil were somewhere else. He couldn't get a fix on them. Which was a little concerning, but he figured that just meant they were further away. He sent a mental tug to the members of his pack that were close enough as Levy finished her soup. "So pack?" Shaggy grinned as he raised his right hand and shifted it. Levy grinned as she watched the black claws of his werewolf form glisten in the lantern light of the bar. He was still getting used to the new black and red sheen of his claws. But he had to admit, they looked kinda badass. Levy sipped her water as he did the same with his left hand. "Animal morphing abilities?" Shaggy snorted. "Mutant werewolf, babe." It didn't at first. Shaggy groused before explaining his whole early game debacle. Levy listened as her annoyance showed on her face. Once he was finished, she growled. "That's such bullshit. How can they not expect the rush on animal-like abilities? That's like the most basic of abilities that players could choose." "Thanks, love." Shaggy deadpanned, drawing an annoyed look from his wife. "You know what I meant." "Yes, and you know I am trying to distract you." Shaggy smiled until Levy blew out a breath and relaxed back in her seat. "Fine, but it's still bullshit. You were basically hobbled at the start." "Excuse me, but which of us has a bar lair and built a legion with a bunch of players? Hell, we got over 70 lackeys working for us. Meanwhile, you've been stuck in some witch's pocket, studying magic like some kind of nerd." Levy stuck her tongue at him, but conceded the point. Shaggy grinned at her as he felt Rita and Seacrass drawing closer. Tom was still underground, and he really hoped the asshat was just asleep and not ignoring him. He turned to say hi to his two pack members and froze as he saw them both. They were both kitted out with new armor and weapons. Gone was the standard fantasy game leather armor. It had been replaced with some slim silvery metal armor of some kind. But while Seacrass now resembled a more standard heavily armored knight, Rita was in a more slim-fitting and piecemeal number. Shaggy also raised an eyebrow at their weapons. Rita was still carrying a sword, but it was clearly much newer and seemed to be made of the same silvery metal as their armor. Seacrass had an almost comical giant club made of silver metal. "Whoa," Shaggy said involuntarily. Rita grinned as she approached and even did a little twirl. Showing off her armor. "The kid does good work, right? I mean, he's a pain in the ass to work for, but you can't deny the results." Seacrass nodded silently as Shaggy asked. "Kid? You mean rolled?" Rita nodded but didn't answer as her eyes went to Levy. His drow wife was also looking over the metal armor with interest. Shaggy could almost hear the gears in his wife's head turning, and he gave a little internal shudder and the possible mayhem she was cooking up in that brain of hers. "Rita, Seacrass, this is my wife, Levy. She's an accomplished sorceress and mischief maker." "Oh, I like her already." Rita grinned as Seacrass bowed at the waist. "I am honored to meet the mistress." "Mistress? Oh, I like that, love." Shaggy groaned and shook his head as he tried to keep the conversation moving. So what's with the gear? We seriously weren't gone that long. No, you weren't. But with you gone, we've had a lot of excess energy. So we ran it off by taking it to the freaks in Quinnica. Which, with Ephemera's new tribute system, has made the pack a tidy sum. Which we all spent at Silas and Rold's new shop. That little prick really got himself set up down here that quick. Well yeah, about that Rita trailed off. He set up in Quinnica territory. Seacrest stated boldly. What? Shaggy yelled. That meant the little prick was paying tithe to the space vamps and was probably making them gear too. Rita shrugged. It made the most sense for the kid. We're a relatively small group and we can't get him the tech or materials he needs. He still deals with us, although I bet the Quinnica don't know about it. But I bet he's still outfitting their guys. Shaggy grumbled as Rita nodded. Yeah, but with swords and claws. He's not making guns or anything yet. So our boys have been pretty happy with it. If you don't want to pay Silas and Rold's prices, you can hit a Quinnica patrol and get some new gear. Sounds like the kid is outfitting our group while still working for the enemy. Levy said. That has to be dangerous. Rita nodded. That's why Efi sent 2 of our pack to watch his shop. If the Quinnica try anything, Vic and Sybil can provide cover. They also watch over our people when they go to buy stuff. That has to be boring for those 2. It is. Please tell me you have something for us. Beating up Quinnica and the occasionally pack of freaks is fun and all, but we need a challenge. Oh, I got something alright. Don't know how challenging you'll find it, though. But it'll get us out in the sun. Seacrest and Rita grinned. The older woman sat down in the chair and scooted it closer as Seacrest took up position by Shaggy's chair. Shaggy chuckled at the looks on their faces, and he could feel their excitement through the bond. But he shook his head and stood. Not here. I wanted everyone present. Mostly, I just wanted everyone to meet my wife. But if we are going to plan world domination, we should go downstairs. Rita jumped up. Well shit, boss. Let's go. I'll have a runner go fetch Vic and Sybil. Seacrest, you go wake up Sulky McGee. The big lizard man walked off as Shaggy and Levy got up. Sulky? Rita shook her head. He kept hitting on one of the Needle sisters. She finally got fed up and loudly and angrily proclaimed she would never be interested. Shaggy shook his head as Levy grimaced. Poor guy. He's an idiot who can't take a hint. Rita scoffed. So she had to hit him over the head with it instead. Now that he knows, he can move on to his next victim. But let's get downstairs. Come on, let's go. Shaggy smiled as he was herded toward the stairs behind the stage. Levy held his hand as Rita sheepdogged them through the crowd. He felt like between his wife and his pack, they were going to take the city of Austin by storm. Of course, there was still Cog to contend with, and whatever Obadiah wanted. But they were going to stock up on missions and jump back out there. Ready to conquer the virtual world. It was quick work to wake up Tom and go around informing people of their plans. A few other thugs had wanted to join in, but some sharp looks from Rita and the others, and those lackeys were sent packing. The long part was waiting for Vic and Sybil. Apparently, Rold's shop was a pretty good way to the southwest. So while they waited, Levy and Shaggy helped Slink. The boy was still monitoring and assigning tasks from the war room console. It was a pretty simple setup, but finding the right lackey for the task was annoying. It was like handing out chores to children. They all wanted the exciting jobs. The patrol jobs or something that'd have them running around and fighting. Telling a bunch of leather-clad, mohawk-having thugs to guard a storefront for 8 hours a day was a pain. But the work needed to be done and their territory needed to be protected. Levy was a little nicer about it. She had a way of convincing people that what was required wasn't always fun. Shaggy had just taken to threatening a few of them. Sure, it lowered their loyalty a bit, but the fear bonus made up for it. Slink, meanwhile, was gathering all their intel reports and throwing the relevant ones into the war table. "This thing is so cool," Levy said as she watched the holodisplay update as Slink input the reports. "It would be even cooler if we had better scouts." Slink grumbled. Shaggy finished growling orders at the newest lackey and turned to Slink. "What about Ephemera's people? She was working on getting some scouts together, right?" Slink nodded. "Sure, but she was also running things. So, time constraints. But now that we're back, we can knuckle down and get our lackeys into shape. I just wish Dave was here. He was in charge of training and our people need to run off some energy. Send them at the Quinnica." "Can't do that. That'll start a war we aren't ready for. For now, the space vamps are sticking to their side of the street. So we'll stick to ours and train up." "What about an exercise room?" Levy asked as she spun the display around. Slink gave a start as the idea hit him. "Oh shit. That's a great idea." The kid dug through his menus, looking for something. Eventually, he found it as he shouted. "Matthews. Lawrence. Twilnerick." One clicked his tongue angrily. "Go get exercise equipment?" "Boss, the good stuff is all topside." The brown-haired human that had spoken sneered and looked ready to test Shaggy's patience. But Levy's soft voice spoke from behind Shaggy. "We all need this. Our men need a place to relax and get a workout in. Why don't you pick up a few more amenities while you are up there?" "We don't have the cash for that," the second human said. "Bahahahaha." Shaggy burst out laughing as he moved forward and placed a hand on the blond man's shoulder. All three lackeys looked at each other before grinning madly and rushing off toward the stairs. Shaggy sighed as he watched them go. Slink was already back to going through reports and looking over their data. Levy rubbed Shaggy's shoulders and sighed. "They are so cute at that age," she said, waving a hand idly at the door to the stairs. "Bunch of whiners." Shaggy grumbled. "Oh, leave them alone. You can't blame a bunch of thugs for wanting some action." Shaggy thought about arguing, but he knew she was right. Hell, he was about to run off on his own adventure. But the damn NPCs were a little too lifelike. They had a decent bit of agency, and he wasn't sure if he liked it. It made them fun to interact with, but who could say if they would stay loyal, given how capricious they were? Ephemera stretched, yawned, and scratched her stomach. The black shirt she wore rose a bit, revealing her pale skin. Shaggy could smell the hormones in the room as several men stared. But the strongest mix was coming from Slink. Shaggy grinned at his wife and shook his head as a sleepy Ephemera glared around for a few seconds. It's here. They moved it to the 3rd floor and I've handed out the renovation jobs." Slink stuttered. Shaggy saw his wife hide a grin of her own as Ephemera finally registered their presence. She rushed over and squeezed the kid into a hug and Shaggy felt the energy in the room shift dramatically. Several men had the sharp smell of anger and he glared a few down until Effie finally released the young man. "Thanks, kid. It's great that all of you are back. Another day of this shit and I'd started killing people." Slink chuckled nervously as the red coloring on his face slowly went away. Shaggy grunted loudly to get Ephemera's attention. When he had it, he waved a hand at the table. "Why didn't you find some people to help?" Ephemera turned an eye to the surrounding lackeys and said. "Because I don't trust them enough, boss. Some of these fellas showed up after you lot went on your little vacation. I don't want our enemies to get their eyes on our information." Shaggy spun and looked at the large open room the war table was housed in. After finishing his spin, he locked eyes with his number 1 henchman and raised an eyebrow. The pale woman grinned manically before shrugging her shoulders. Ahem, it was easier to hand out missions if the table was more centrally located. But the thought of espionage is something to consider. Slink mumbled. "See. Snakeboy agrees with me. We need to get this entire operation into its own room and maybe then we can think about staffing it." Shaggy sighed and rubbed a hand down his face. Something for the list. But for now, do you want to join me, the pack and my wife in running around topside? Ephemera looked excited, but Slink cut in again. Sorry, but I have to log soon. So Ify will have to take over until I get back. I'll woo. Ephemera whined as a small cheer rose from a few of the assembled lackeys. Levy chuckled as Slink looked apologetic. Shaggy shrugged and gave his number one a pitying look. The pale woman waved him away. I'll get the boys on renovating down here so we can get this damn table squared away. Maybe I'll meet up with you later. Shaggy shook his head a little. I don't see how. We've got a couple of jobs topside. So we will move around a lot. Levy gave a dramatic sigh. I've got it. She waved her hands in a complicated gesture again and a symbol formed on her own and Ephemera's skin. There. We are now temporarily linked. You'll be able to find me when we are topside and I won't be far from my temperamental husband. Ephemera finally gave Levy a once-over and smiled happily as she took in the drow woman. Turning to Shaggy, she asked. So this is your old lady, boss? Levy snorted as she answered before Shaggy could get a word out. Please. He's my old man. But, Shags, who is this? Shaggy sighed dramatically. Levy, this is my number one henchman and de facto second-in-command, Ephemera. Ephemera, this is my wife and de facto headache-inducer. Oh, you love me. Levy stated as she threw an arm over his shoulders and gave his cheek a kiss. But your second-in-command looks capable. Imma steal her. Ephemera grinned. Sorry, boss lady. I serve the boss, but I'll do my best to find you a second. Levy chuckled. He. I'm kidding, Ify. I have a few people coming here to join up with my husband's crew. So I'll find a second out of that lot. Turning to Shaggy, she added. In fact, all the players in your group should get their loyalties up enough with a lackey to have a second. It'll improve morale and make it easier to delegate. I know, love. We'll get to it. But if you've forgotten, 2 of our number got ganked. Levy waved a hand. Later. I know. I'm just planning. Rubbing his hands together, Shaggy exhaled. Well, now that Ify is tagged, all we have to do is wait for Vic and Sybil to arrive and we can start. Almost on cue, the man and woman burst through the door leading to the outside stairs. Both looked excited and were glancing around the room like excited puppies. When they spotted Shaggy, they both ran over and immediately started thanking him. Yeah, that detail was shit. Staying on a damn roof or in a room all day watching some snot-nosed asshole shop. Yeah. Ephemera threw up her hands in annoyance. I gave y'all a cushy-ass job watching some brat and you act like it was the worst thing ever. See if I help you again. Vic and Sybil glared at Ephemera but said nothing. Shaggy gave a mental call to Rita, Seacrass, and Tom. As he did, he tapped Vic's new black hat and asked. What in the hell is up with the new hat, Tex? Sybil snorted as Vic straightened his new addition and smiled. It's cool, right? I figure if I'm going to be the team's sharpshooter, I need a hat. And like we told you, Rita's voice called from the far side of the room. That doesn't make sense. Vic turned, annoyed. It keeps the sun out of my eyes when I'm aiming at some vamp that wants to gut your old ass. There's no sun down here. Sybil cackled. Shaggy could tell this was a conversation that had happened before. So he turned to Ephemera and Slink and waved a hand. We're out of here. Slink, you know where we'll be for the foreseeable future. But first I need to stop by the Brute clan's mansion and meet Obadiah. What for? Slink and Ephemera asked. As they traveled, Shaggy filled in his pack on what happened topside as best he could. Levy also introduced herself to the members she hadn't met yet. Tom, in particular, seemed annoyed at Levy, for some reason. When Shaggy pressed him on the feeling, the slight man groaned. Because, boss, why do you get to hang with all the fine women? I'm a damn werewolf, right? I should be swimming in honeys. Rita snorted. Pfft. You ever think it's because you say things like swimming in honeys that might have something to do with your relationship status? No. Why? Shaggy covered a laugh and added. Also, you're not a werewolf. I'm just sharing a bit of my power with you right now. Once I learn how to create werewolves, it will make the turning easier. Or at least it should. You don't know? Levi asked. Shaggy shrugged. My werewolf sensei is currently off doing Lord knows what. They were currently jogging through the crowded streets of Undertown. Although with a party their size and as heavily armed as they were, few people got in their way. Shaggy had initially been concerned that Levi wouldn't be able to keep up. But the tall drow woman said a few magic words and was suddenly running alongside them like it was nothing. Shaggy worried about how long she could keep up with that spell. But he also realized that his wife was doing it as a sort of power play with his pack. They didn't know her, and she wanted to show that she could keep up with the rest of them. Shaggy didn't think it was necessary, but he also didn't want to say anything in the group. So instead, he matched pace with her and angled their little jogging party toward the brute's mansion. He felt contentment coming from his pack and he tried to decipher the feeling. A few of them were elated to be running as a whole again, while others were more excited to bash skulls. Of course, there was Tom's minor annoyance at not being a werewolf, but those feelings were dwarfed by his excitement as well. Now that they were moving in a pack, Shaggy could feel them more clearly, and it was a little overpowering. It made him want to rush ahead at full speed, but he curtailed the feeling as they crossed into the brute clan's turf. The only sign Shaggy had that they had crossed the invisible line was that the various lackeys and thugs on street corners disappeared. They were replaced by a feeling of constantly being watched. A feeling that would have normally put Shaggy on edge, but with his pack and his wife with him, it was little more than a minor annoyance. It was when they were almost to the mansion when they met the first brute clan patrol. Shaggy raised a hand in greeting. Hail. We are friends of the brute clan. Hail? Levi snorted. That's not the phrase, boss. Rita whispered. Huh? Shaggy asked as he saw a few of the big lizard people ready their spears to attack. The phrase you are supposed to say when you meet a brute clan patrol. Shaggy trailed off as he tried to remember, but nothing came to him. Rita sighed and pushed forward. We give respect to the honored elders of the brute clan. The approaching patrol slowed as Shaggy rubbed his temples and remembered the conversation he had with Vlad. Gorkainak, one elder, had insisted on such a code phrase. Probably to mess with Shaggy, or maybe to instill at least a false sense of obedience from what some elders considered no more than a street gang. He doubted it worked. State your business. One lizard ordered. Shaggy growled, but tried to keep things civil. He could feel his pack tense up at his mood and he didn't want to start an incident. We are looking for a man named Obadiah. It was our understanding he was here. The lead brute clan lizard grunted. Ah, the old man. Yes, he has taken residence near here. Near? It was my understanding that he was at the mansion. The lizard man grimaced. He was, but some elders felt it wasn't right for a human to live among us, so they asked him to move outside the grounds. He is still a friend to us, but... Shaggy nodded as the lizard trailed off. He got it. The brute clan had taken to segregation and social hierarchy like a duck to water. They were practically programmed that way. Everything foreign or new was tossed aside, even if it could help them. They were growing, but slowly. If you could point us in his direction, we would be grateful. After getting the directions, Shaggy and his pack rushed off again. Obadiah had moved to a nearby shack just up the dirt road from the brute clan's mansion. Apparently the old man had even taken to stopping a few freak patrols that got too close. Shaggy was wondering how the elderly man had accomplished that when he noticed Levi flag in her running. Slowing to a stop, he smiled at her. Need a lift? What? Like a piggyback? Dear, not in front of the pack. Levi panted. Rita and the others chuckled as Shaggy shook his head and focused his mind again. He felt his body twist and bend, and with a small thud, he was suddenly on all fours, shaking his massive wolf's head. Levy and the others all backed up, surprised. He could feel shock from his pack, which confused him until he remembered he was a demon wolf now. Holy shit, boss. What the hell happened to you? Levy moved a hand toward Shaggy's head and he leaned into it. He felt her running her fingers through his hair and he chuffed happily. He heard his wife giggle as she kept up the scratches until finally he laid down and turned his head to look at his back. Levy laughed happily as his intention became clear. Shaggy groaned and shook his head as Levy jumped onto his back. He saw Tom moving too as well, but he stood up and yipped at his pack. "Ah, come on." Tom grumbled, but said nothing else. Shaggy was ready to run again through the alleyways of Undertown when a large blue blast hit the dirt in front of him. He froze and looked as his pack surrounded him defensively. A light white shimmer appeared around his head and he thought he heard Levy chanting something. But a voice cut through the air. "I don't know what y'all want. But I reckon you're gonna want to turn around and head back home." Shaggy sniffed the air as he gave a mental tug at Rita. He tried to send her orders to stall. She must have gotten it, as she immediately started stating their objectives. The scent trail in the air was an odd mix of blue and green, and Shaggy briefly wondered what the hell the new color meant. But the smell that came with the colors made him smile. He focused again and immediately shifted. He vaguely heard a thump behind him as he returned to his human form shirtless. But thankfully, his pants and shoes had shifted with him. "Ass," Levy muttered behind him. "Sorry, love," Shaggy said before shouting. "Obadiah, could you please not kill my pack when we're looking for you?" There was a long pause before the old man's voice broke the silence. "Well, shit." Movement above them brought everyone's eyes up. Sybil and Vic trained their weapons upward as Seacrest moved to cover Shaggy and Levy, and Rita edged closer to the building. Tom actually hid behind Shaggy and Levy. Shaggy sent the bastard a few choice emotions down the pack link, but kept his eyes on the older man standing on a nearby roof. He was dressed in camo pants and a plain beige shirt. There was no sign of the weapon he had used to blast a hole in the street. But Shaggy smelled some kind of burning liquid coming from Obadiah. The old man still smelled of metal, plastic, and oil. The odd mix stung Shaggy's nose, but he did his best to ignore it. Obadiah put a foot on the edge of the building and glanced down at them. "You finally ready to do some work for me?" "Depends how much you pay," Shaggy grinned. "But we are heading topside, anyway. So I figured we could see what you needed to get done." Obadiah gave them all a once-over before he stepped off the roof. Shaggy winced as the old man slammed into the ground. It was only a 15-foot drop, but that could still mess with your ankles, even if you weren't an old man. But a large clank brought Shaggy's gaze back up to where Obadiah slammed into the dirt. The old man was unscathed, but there was a small crater around his feet. Shaggy raised an eyebrow and glanced back at his wife. She gave him an incredulous, but excited, look. "Well, the pay's good. But if you get caught, I won't be coming for ya." Shaggy shrugged, but Levy asked, "What will we be doing?" Obadiah glanced up and down the road before he waved a hand toward a nearby metal shack. Shaggy and the others piled in except for Seacrest, who stood guard near the door. Shaggy tried to get the big lizard man to come in, but his largest pack member just shook his head. "Doesn't matter if I hear it, boss. You lead, I follow. Besides, planning's not my strong suit." Shaggy shrugged and let the big lizard do what he wanted. Inside the small house, Obadiah lit a nearby candle and sighed. The house was empty save for a few broken bits of furniture and the table Obadiah set the candle on. When he was done, he leaned against the sheet metal wall and looked them over again. Levy huffed, annoyed. "Well? Out with it." Obadiah smiled at her before he rubbed his hands together. As he did, Shaggy noticed the plastic smell got stronger. He brushed the scent off his nose as Obadiah sighed. So, I've been working with some of your people for the past few days. Good workers, but they were doing the grunt work. Now that it looks like I have a solid team here, I can fill you in. Shaggy nodded, and the others all waited with bated breath for the old man to continue. When he did, it almost sounded like Obadiah was apologetic about what he was going to ask them to do. I work for a certain clandestine agency, which I will not name. But suffice it to say, they have some concerns about the Austin area. What I need is a team to go around and collect information and grab a few people. It will all be off the books and highly illegal. But the pay will be lucrative. And the loot? Levy asked. Shaggy gave his wife a look. NPCs wouldn't recognize the term, but she smiled at him and gave a little shake of her head. Obadiah smiled at Levy and answered. Whatever you find is yours to keep. But the missions come first. What are these missions? Are we going to have to come back up here to get them one by one? Shaggy asked, crossing his arms in front of his chest. Nope. I have a few lists of what my people want done. Once you are done with a list, destroy it to the best of your ability, and then move on to the next one. Each list has a reward attached. Once I get confirmation that the list is done, my people will authorize payment. How we gonna get paid if we are all topside? Tom asked. Shaggy waved the angry man off. Send the payments to the Vipers Denver. Tell them to split it normally between the 7 of us. Obadiah nodded. I can do that. So you want the jobs? I'm serious. If we had more people that could magic the dam guards like she did, we could take over the whole dam tunnel. Tom was saying as they exited said tunnel. Shaggy sighed. It's not a matter of taking it over. We'd have to hold it. For now, we can keep sneaking our people out and the Quinnica will be none the wiser. But if we start magically wiping the brains of every guard, I think someone will notice. Not what I am doing, by the way. Levy interjected, putting a hand up to cover her eyes. Man, the shift between Undertown and the city is pretty jarring, huh? Shaggy nodded as the other members of his pack groaned at the sight of the sun. It was early morning in Austin. After all the preparations and a slight argument about their new van, Shaggy and his crew had finally gotten topside. However, it looked like the sun was just raising over the city and the early morning cool was in the air. Even with the small amount of sunlight visible between the buildings, though, it was still a lot brighter than Undertown. First stop is an APD safe house. We'll check it over, see if it's a good fit, and if it is, we'll hang around and get to business. Actually, Levy said, sounding apologetic. I'm going to meet up with some of my girls. My phone doesn't work in Corgan's dimension and I want to tell them what's going on. Maybe see if any want to move to Undertown. Shaggy sighed, but gave his wife a hug. I get it. You go do that and we can all meet for lunch. There's a diner, not that far from here, called Villainess. Maybe we can meet there? Oh, you know Villainess? Love that place. Let's do that and I can get you a damn phone while I'm at it. Shaggy was about to wave off the suggestion, but then he remembered that his wife's phone worked both above and underground. So he nodded excitedly. Levy smiled and patted his cheek before turning toward the opposite end of the alleyway. Shaggy watched her go with a kind of melancholy. They had just started playing together and now she was running off to see her friends? It was annoying, but he got it. They couldn't be stuck at the hip the entire time they were playing. They'd drive each other crazy. A large hand came down on Shaggy's shoulder. He almost spun and clawed at the bastard, but he realized it was Seacrass trying to comfort him. The big green hand slapped his shoulder a few times as Seacrass' long snout-like mouth flapped open a few times. Trying to find something to say. Shaggy chuckled at how comical the big lizard looked. It's fine, Seacrass. She has her own thing that she needs to be doing. For now, let's move out. The members of his pack nodded, and they all exited the alleyway. Shaggy led the way as he tried to remember the address on the safe house Zelthub had given him. It was somewhere in the northwest of downtown Austin. A hotel or apartment complex that had a room assigned to the APD. Shaggy wasn't sure how big the room was, but he figured they would manage, even with Seacrest's bulk. As they traveled down the early morning sidewalk, Shaggy had to suppress a chuckle. They looked like a bunch of hitchhikers arriving in the city. None of his pack were wearing their armor, and they were all dressed in civilian clothes. Even Seacrest had found a shirt that would fit his bulk. They also had gathered a few backpacks and thrown their weapons and armor into them, along with a few clothes. So they all moved down the streets, dirty from the tunnels, and carrying large backpacks. Shaggy was sure they looked like a bunch of outdoor people coming in from the wilderness. Tom's link spiked with annoyance suddenly, and Shaggy turned to see the guy messing with his pack strap. When he felt Shaggy's gaze, he looked up and grinned sheepishly. "Sorry, boss. Damn things, just uncomfortable as hell." Shaggy nodded as he adjusted his own pack. All he had really needed was clothes, but the crew made him pack the food. He had told them they had food topside, but apparently his pack loved the burgers the Minotaur chefs at the den made. So they insisted he pack a few dozen. Shaggy was honestly surprised he hadn't attracted every dog in Austin, the way his pack smelled. His shirts were probably going to smell like barbecue the entire time they were up here, too. "I get it. But we don't have that far to go. Why don't we commandeer a car?" Sybil asked. "We can't do that. We're working for the police now. They catch us in a stolen car and they'll pitch a fit." Shaggy waved a hand at Vic and corrected. "We don't work for the police. We are just working with them to eliminate a few dealers and some distributors." "Explain to me, again, why you thought this was a good idea, boss." Rita grunted. "Because we can operate topside with impunity while also hitting our competition. Also, nothing says we can't skim some off the top. Criminals have money too, you know." Seacrest nodded. "Probably more money." Shaggy snapped his fingers. "Exactly," he tapped his backpack. "We also have the old man's assignments to go through as well." Vic lit a cigarette as they walked and said, "About that, while I don't mind clandestine work, we need to be careful about that, old man. He looks familiar." Sybil jumped excitedly. "Oh. You thought so too? I feel like I've seen his face before somewhere." "Not a good look for a spook, is it? Being recognizable?" Tom added. "Not like we can remember where we've seen him, though. So it probably doesn't matter. But I mean, the old man operates like an old hand at all this stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me if he had a few contingencies in place. Maybe even a few plans that involve getting rid of us loose ends?" Shaggy nodded at Vic's words. "I get that, but we're tougher than we look and he doesn't strike me as someone to burn bridges that quickly. If we do good work and we keep our heads down, we should be fine." Vic nodded, but Seacrest gave a hacking cough. Ack, I'm no good at stealth, boss." "I get that, big man. Which is why you'll be on the drug team. I figure there is where we'll need a shock and awe approach. Something you and Rita do very well. So me and Vic get the spook jobs? If required. I think the old man's jobs are going to take a variety of skill sets. So we'll read the first one and see what's required there. Getting tired of working with me, SYB?" The pair fell into bantering as Shaggy smiled at them. A tug on his mental link brought his head around to Rita, who was looking at him questioningly. He raised an eyebrow and the older woman sighed. "A car?" The initial question was about a car. "So I was wondering, if we are not worried about the cops, why don't we just steal one and stop lugging these heavy-ass packs?" Shaggy coughed awkwardly. "Well, I don't know how to hot wire or hack a car. Do any of you?" Shaggy was surprised when Sybil and Tom raised their hands. His surprise must have shown on his face, 'cause Sybil scoffed. "We were all criminals before we met you, boss. Remember? I even had a decent thing going as a car thief." Sybil looked smug, but she quickly added. "Although I am much happier now." I've got power, some good friends to watch my back, and some pretty sweet gear. Shaggy smiled as Tom added. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't much of a car thief, but breaking in and stealing stuff? Used to do it all the time. Although newer cars are a pain. What with electronic locks and biometric entry shit. If we're going to grab something, it should probably be an older car. Probably a roller. Flyers are going to be way too complicated. Good idea, Tom. So I guess everyone keeps an eye out, and if you see a vehicle that'll fit all of us, shout out. For now, let's keep moving. They had barely gone a few blocks before Seacrest gave a loud grunt. With everyone's attention, including a few passers-by on the street, the large lizard man pointed at a large SUV parked on the side of the road. It was in front of an office building and looked fairly old. Shaggy couldn't see any telltale signs of a hover conversion either. It looked like a standard old-school SUV. Only problem was that it was bright red. Shaggy was about to ask them to find another one, but Sybil and Tom were already rushing toward the vehicle excitedly. Fine. Everyone else is on lookout and cover. Shaggy ordered. Vic tipped his hat as Seacrest and Rita moved to cover the two car thieves' work. Shaggy kept his eyes down the other end of the street and waited. Few people were moving about on the sidewalks this early in the morning. But they had already had a few drones zoom overhead in their early morning flyovers. But the skies and streets all looked clear. Shaggy bounced on the balls of his feet as he waited. Soon enough, a feeling of elation zipped over the pack link, and as one, they all turned toward the SUV. Sybil and Tom were in the front and passenger seats, happily dancing as the engine roared to life. Not wanting them to celebrate too much, Shaggy rushed over and started packing his bag into the trunk. Come on, people. Let's move it. We don't want to stick around. The others all piled in carrying their bags as Sybil closed the driver's side door. Clearly intent on driving. Shaggy sighed as he dove into the back and joined Rita in the far back seats. The SUV had 3 rows of seats. Vic and Seacrest had taken the middle seats, and Tom was still in the passenger seat, so Shaggy was stuck in the back. Sybil threw the car into drive and howled in happiness as the big red SUV roared down the road. Shaggy sighed again and moved to say something when Sybil called back. I know, boss. I just wanted to kick things off with a bang. It'll be super secret driving from here on out, promise. Y'all are getting better at reading my moods through the link. Shaggy grumbled. While you were gone, it was like the link was full of primal instincts. The need to run, hunt, and kill. But once you came back, the link calmed down and now, I can almost feel you better, Vic explained. You are clearer through the link. Rita admitted. Shaggy thought to try something and sent a quick message to Sybil in the front seat over the pack link. He saw the woman straighten up slightly. She turned back and glared at him as she answered his question. First off, that was freaky as all hell. Second, in answer to your question, we still need to scramble the car's ID code. Otherwise, when the car is reported stolen, the drones will be on the lookout for the car code. Shaggy nodded as he ignored the questioning looks from the rest of his pack. Won't that make us a bigger target? Uncoded car roaming around that looks exactly like the car that was reported missing? Yeah, Tom answered. Which is why we are going to need to find a tablet or something to hack the car's internals and change the code. Didn't the spook give you a tablet, boss? Shaggy nodded as he turned around and unzipped his pack. Yeah, but I don't think we want to use it. It's going to be our job board for the old man's missions. We could steal a tablet. Rita provided helpfully. Are we on a time crunch to scramble the car code? Kind of, Sybil answered. If we can get the car into a parking structure or underground, that'll give us some time, though. Does the hotel we're going to have a parking garage? I don't know. Shaggy turned back around with the tablet and turned it on. A light blue glow cascaded over his face as the display turned on. There were no OS or apps. Just a black screen with a wall of light blue text. Target, Grant Yelnick Sint. Operation, apprehension and elimination. Time frame, 2 days. Notes: subject must be taken in clear view of his guards. Once taken, the subject is to be eliminated and disposed of. Subject must not be found at all. Incineration through non-magical means is recommended. The apartment complex where the safe house was located was a 4-story brick building on the corner of a short block. It was in the northwest district of downtown Austin, next to a defunct laundromat. If Shaggy hadn't known that the place was an APD safe house, he would have thought it was an abandoned tenement building. His pack groaned at the sight of it as Sybil pulled the car into an alleyway next to the building. "It's not that bad," Shaggy lied. He felt their doubt through the pack link and shook his head. Mostly at himself. He didn't know what he had been expecting, but an abandoned apartment building wasn't it. Luckily, Sybil found a small parking garage around the back of the building. It was clearly made for tenants to park their cars. But it was now filled with trash and other junk. Small miracles. Sybil muttered as she parked the car and turned off the engine. Shaggy silently agreed. "Okay, first things first. When we get in there, I want everyone to be on the lookout for any listening or recording devices. These are the cops and I'm a known criminal. So I wouldn't put it past them to want to monitor us. But we don't want that. So every camera, every electronic bug, or anything else like that. Take it out. Cops ain't going to like that." Thanks to the car, they had made good time in the city. The roads were clogging up with people heading into and out of work. Hover cars whizzed by overhead between office buildings and other vehicles. Shaggy kept his nose up and ready for any foreign or mysterious smells in the air. Shaggy got the faint smell of body odor, beer, and piss from the surrounding parking area. He suspected the garage had a homeless population at some point. But they must have ran off or were somewhere in the city. Piled up trash filled the tiny road leading behind the apartment complex, and the smell of wood rot and mold permeated the apartment building. Shaggy sighed as they collected their things and walked around to the front of the complex. "Two on the street," Vic muttered. As one they turned to look and Shaggy heard Vic sigh. They weren't a stealthy lot, his group. Shaggy smirked as he saw 2 people walking northward along the sidewalk, carrying briefcases and dressed in business suits. "Not an office building for a few blocks in any direction, is there?" Rita asked. "Nope," Shaggy and the others replied at the same time. The 2 men froze as they noticed the group's gaze. Shaggy saw the shoulders on both of them tense up, and he was sure they were going to either introduce themselves or hurry down the street. Instead, one man pulled out a disc communicator and made a call. Shaggy snorted as Tom shook his head. "Not very covert, are they?" "That's probably the point," said Vic. "Put us on the back foot. Let us know they are watching us all the time." They pushed their way through the creaky old front door of the building, and Shaggy was surprised to hear the sounds of footsteps and conversation. There were people living in the building. Shaggy had been sure the damn thing was abandoned. Then again, that wouldn't stop most people if there were warm rooms and no one to tell them to leave. Sharing a look with his pack, Shaggy hurried down the hallway and toward the stairs. The one elevator in the building's lobby had a big yellow out-of-order sign placed on it. He heard Tom groan as his pack mate remembered they were going to the 4th floor. The door to the staircase stuck a bit as Shaggy pushed, so he put a bit more strength into it. Crack. There was a loud snap as Shaggy stumbled into the staircase and came face to face with 4 people. 2 were seated on the stairs and another was standing. The 4th was seated on the staircase's handrail and all 4 were staring at them. Shaggy sighed as he looked over at the 4 young people. Their hands were all hurriedly jammed into their pockets and they looked at him and his pack like they had just been caught. Shaggy glanced down and saw that a wooden broom had been jammed against the door. He had snapped it when he forced the door open. "Can't you take a hint, short stack?" a voice said. Shaggy turned and saw the standing guy glaring at him. Shaggy snorted as he took in the kid's sneer. It was full of bravado and the false confidence that comes with being young. The young man was wearing torn jeans and a gray leather jacket. Blue highlights crisscrossed his dark hair, and Shaggy was sure he saw some gold fillings in the boy's teeth. Public stairwell, kid. Not a good place to do business. The other three young people bristled at his words, but Blue Hair looked outright pissed. There was a shift in the air, and the temperature in the stairwell seemed to drop. The boy's eyes shone blue, and his skin started taking on a light blue hue. Shaggy sighed again and waited for whatever the kid was going to do. He felt his pack tense up like a muscle ready to be used. Soon the kid finished his transformation, and an ice-covered young man stood in front of Shaggy, posturing menacingly. The ice looked thin and pale as the boy moved forward, towering over Shaggy. "Who you calling kid?" Shaggy shifted his right hand and raised his claws to poke at the boy's chest. "Neat trick. But how thick is that ice?" Shaggy raised a black and red claw up to the ice and pressed inward. There was a quiet crinkling as the ice gave easily, but the boy didn't back down. Even as Shaggy's claw pierced the ice and blood appeared as Shaggy broke skin. "Luis," said a girl's voice. Shaggy looked and saw the girl on the stair railing, looking worried. He withdrew his claw and looked up at the young man. Luis was still covered in a thin sheet of ice, but Shaggy thought the kid looked scared. The kid had stepped up to a threat in front of his crew, and now, if he backed down, it wouldn't look good. Shaggy could appreciate that. He shifted his hand back to normal and curled his fist. Without another word, he slammed a punch right into Luis' face and started moving again. The boy collapsed like a bunch of dead weight, and the kid started shouting angrily. The girl rushed over to Luis, and Shaggy saw Sybil move to stop her, but a quick mental tug and his pack left things alone. Shaggy started up the stairs again, ignoring the rest of Luis' friends. The worried noises and shouting died away as his group made it to the third floor and kept climbing. Rita moved up next to Shaggy and smiled. "You're a kind soul. Did you know that, boss?" "Pfft. Yeah, I'm a regular upstanding citizen. Why not just claw the bastard?" Tom voiced. Shaggy wondered if Tom could feel the irritation coming from the others as well as he could. They all seemed to understand what he had done. Maybe it wasn't the best way to handle things, but it meant he didn't have to deal with a body so soon after deciding to help the police. Instead of saying anything, Shaggy turned to Vic. "Watch them." Vic snorted. "On top of everything else?" "Sure thing, boss. I got it." Shaggy groaned as he continued to the fourth floor. "That goes for everyone. We don't need a bunch of kids butting into our business. So we should just ACK." Shaggy heard a loud thump as someone smacked Tom. A whispered conversation behind him told Shaggy that someone was explaining things to his grouchy pack member. Upon entering the fourth floor, Shaggy sighed as he realized they had the floor to themselves. All the doors along the hallways were open except the last one all the way down on the end on the right side. Shaggy waved a hand and sent an order through the pack link. His pack broke apart, each taking a room and searching. Shaggy walked to the far end as his pack tore into the floor's rooms. Trash and debris were thrown out into the hallway as they cleared out everything. Coming to the far door, Shaggy placed his hand on the palm scanner and mentally crossed his fingers. The red glow of the scanner pulsed angrily for a few seconds before a loud beep filled the halls and the scanner turned green. The door unlocked and Shaggy pushed his way in, holding his breath. The apartment looked just as crappy as the rest of the building. A ratty black couch filled the center of the room and a small kitchenette was off to his right. As well as a hallway leading to 3 more doors, Shaggy guessed, were a bathroom and a few bedrooms. But what took up most of Shaggy's gaze was a large, gray metal case sitting right in front of the couch. He guessed it was the gear Zelthub had promised him. They had packed up the vests the demon cop had given them, but they also were going to need surveillance equipment, along with a way to get their jobs. A thin data tablet sat on top of the crate, and Shaggy gingerly picked it up. It flared to life under his touch, and text scrawled across its surface. "Shaggy. This is the agreed upon equipment. The brass were a little uncomfortable handing so much of this over to a known criminal. So, as you probably suspect, it's all magically and electronically bugged. I know you understand. This tablet will convey your objectives to your team. The tac vests I gave you will activate as soon as you accept a job and be active till the job is complete. Job completion will depend on the job's objectives. Also, while you are operating under the auspices of the APD, I feel I should remind you that you are an outside of the normal police operation. Which means that if you get arrested while fulfilling your duties, things will get messy. We'll be able to help, but we don't want too many eyes on what we are doing. That is all. P.S. Yes, there are a ton of bugs and cameras throughout the rooms. Good luck finding them all. Shaggy smiled and set the tablet down on the ratty couch. He ignored the squeaking that sounded from the couch as the tablet hit the couch and turned slowly, taking in the room. There were no obvious cameras or bugs, but Shaggy didn't trust the light fixture at the center of the living room. So instead of playing hide and seek, he jumped while shifting his hands. A loud crash and a quick slice later, and he was standing in a darkened room, surrounded by broken glass. In the darkness of the room, he could see a small red light hidden behind where the light fixture had been. Shaggy grinned and jumped again, grabbing for the small light. He came away with a small camera, barely an inch big. Smiling into the camera, Shaggy held up a singular claw and mouthed, "That's one." What followed was an hour-long game of hide and seek. His pack tore the fourth floor practically to pieces, searching for anything that could be a camera or listening devices. They discovered a variety of objects, from small buttons to a modified toaster camera. Seacrest had found that one. Apparently, the lizard could hear a buzzing from some of the listening devices. His group operated in silence, relying mostly on the pack link to push and tug at each other. After the fourth camera was found in the headboard of a broken bed, Shaggy grew annoyed and started checking things out the windows. Pretty soon, his entire pack joined in and everything on the fourth floor was tossed. Tables, chairs, beds, bits of carpet, even the ratty couch were sent flying. Over the course of a few hours, they had emptied the entire fourth floor of everything. Shaggy was tearing up the carpet of the actual room the APD had given them when he saw something different for the first time. A red, yellow, green, and blue symbol was drawn onto the floor just below with glittery paint. The colors seemed to shift and move with the light, and Shaggy let out an audible groan. The first sound any of them had made in hours. Seacrest and Tom, who had been helping him, also sent annoyance down the pack link. None of them were really magic literate, and Shaggy was sure that if he messed with whatever magic was pulsing through the symbol, he was sure it would hurt. He needed his wife. She was the magic one in the game. Seacrest tapped his wrist and Shaggy stared curiously at the big lizard. But he merely did it again. Shaggy focused on his pack link and realized the lizard was talking about the time. Shaggy moved to the tablet the APD had given them and checked its clock. But a messenger app was open on the tablet. Apparently, the APD had been sending messages. But they had been so busy, they missed them. Shaggy chuckled at the series of messages obviously from Zelphub. X, that wasn't a challenge to find all the bugs. X, stop. You are damaging police property. X, okay. You found them all. X, don't throw things out the window. X, answer me. X, you are going to hurt someone. X, leave the carpets alone. Shaggy grinned as he swiped a hand over the tablet's keyboard and started typing. S, you could save us the time and just get rid of all the bugs and trackers in here. X, I can't do that. S, then your safe house is getting remodel. But first we're going to lunch. X, well, keep the tablet on you. We might have something for you soon. S, no way. This thing is probably bugged too. We'll get to it after we finish our spring cleaning. Bye-bye now. Shaggy threw the tablet to the floor and sent a mental tug to his pack. The others had been tearing up the fourth floor as well. As they all came together in the hallway, Shaggy saw that they all looked sweaty and tried. He sent a message of food down the link and smiled as they all seemed to perk up. No one goes on the 4th floor. Got it? Luis glared at the money for a full 10 seconds before he snatched them out of Shaggy's hand. The young man waved and his friends cleared the stairwell. Shaggy and his pack continued downward, and Luis started giving orders. Was that smart, boss? They could rob us blind. Our gear and the stuff the you-know-who gave us are still up there, Tom said. Shaggy shrugged. Yes, but if the shit turns up missing, we know who to look for, don't we? Now hurry. I have a lunch date with my wife. Did y'all find the symbols too? Sybil asked as they arrived on the 1st floor. Shaggy nodded as Seacross muttered. Magic. Yeah, boss. We are going to need your old lady and maybe some other equipment if we want to clean the entire floor. That's also, considering they didn't bug the other floors. Sybil said. We can talk about it at lunch. We can also see about getting the car code scrambled while we are out. His group circled the building and made their way around the collection of broken furniture they had hucked into the street. A few people were scattered about looking, but Shaggy ignored them all and went straight for their newly gained SUV. A few people were crowded around the parking area, but Shaggy pushed through and soon they were all in the vehicle and off toward the diner. Boss, do you think the cops will let us get away with all this? I mean, they are probably going to rush the 4th floor and replace all the shit we just got rid of, Rita asked. Shaggy shrugged again. Don't care. If it comes down to it, we can move locations and work on Obadiah's stuff. But you said having an in with the local cops would be a good thing. Sure, but not if it interferes with our business. We need to set the terms of the relationship early, and if they don't agree, we walk. Not like we don't have other business to attend to up here. General agreement met his statement as Sybil drove the car down the road. He didn't know why, but everyone had taken their old seats, and he was once again all the way in the back. Shaggy shook his head, and the busy Austin traffic made Sybil start and stop repeatedly. Sighing, Shaggy checked the time and then groaned. He knew he was going to be late and Levy would never let him hear the end of it.